Two, one. Meow, meow, meow. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome back. We are going to be doing part 3 of the Godhead complex today. Meow, meow, meow. It's not going to be a long one, so let's jump right into it this time, except as usual, we can't because I need to do the social media stuffs first. Hold on one sec. Let's make sure volume's good. Hello, hello, hello. All right. All right, stupid cat sounds like he's loud enough. All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. For today, all right, making sure Nightbot's awake. All right, all three links good. Good, 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 good. Added to my story. We're good. All right, all right, all right. Done. Next one, doobie, 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 doo, doobie, doobie, Discord. Hello, Japan. Hope you're doing well. Slushy cat. Slushy cat's in the Discord. Hello, slush. Meow, meow. All hail, Demon Lord Kitty. All hail, Demon Lord Kitty, ruler of all Minecraft realms. This side, that side, and everywhere. Meow, meow. Fear her. I did go and watch the Minecraft movie. It was rather enjoyable. Obviously, it's not what Minecrafters will necessarily be wanting, but I mean, it was a dumb movie. It was funny. I liked it. I don't have high expectations, honestly. It was the time. Um, Jack Black's really funny. Jason Momoa was pretty good in it. The other actors and actresses, I'm not sure who their names are. I'm sorry, I'm not big on Hollywood names. Post it, and we're off. On to the next one. I believe that's everything. Yes, okay. Get freaking started. Yeah. Also, Valkyrie Live playing. What's this game called? Midnight. The Midnight Walk. The Midnight Walk. Very interesting game. This game is like made. It's made out of clay. It's a claymation game. It's very cool. All right, here we go. Meow 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 meow. Some warm ups. La 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 la. Meow. This smudge in my arm. And every time I look down, I'm like spider. Spiders are friends, chat. Not fighters, spider. Spider Man, spider. They didn't enunciate that properly. So what I said was I have this mark on my smudge, this freaking smudge on my arm. Something off of my skateboard. I don't know. WD-40 mixed with dirt. Every time I look down, I'm like spider, spider. Yeah, there you go. You got it. You got it. All right. All right, here we are. So we have the Minho in his hurry is also very kind because he's like, all right, they've decided they're staying. And then Jackie decided she was staying, so there was gonna be another hour of like goodbye. So Minho's like, all right, fine. We set off first thing in the morning. So they decided to set up a campfire and enjoy their last night together before they split up in groups. And that's where we find ourselves here. Meanwhile, up north, I think Mikhail's dead. Someone stabbed him in the kidneys, and he's probably bleeding out in the tunnels underneath the Remnant Nation. But I think the Remnant Nation has the go ahead to go and start attacking. Seems like there's gonna be a war. I think we're like headed straight into a war. I think Minho and the Maze Cutter are headed up to Alaska where they're gonna find Remnant Nation fighting the Godhead. Because yeah, Mikhail was gonna start an all-out war against Alexandra for killing Nicholas, which may have all been according to Nicholas's plans. I have no clue, honestly. Part 3, Direct Observation. Every day I change my mind about going back and finding my friends for a proper send off. But would one long goodbye ever be enough? Nothing ever seems like enough, does it? So today, I'll decide not to go back and find them. Today, I'll decide goodbyes are rubbish. Who knows about tomorrow? Maybe tomorrow I'll change my mind again. The Book of Newt. That Newt guy, he had some interesting thoughts. Chapter 15, Sound the Alarms, Part 1, Alexandria. The small fishing boat puttered to a stop and Manus slipped into the icy water and pulled it ashore to sit on top of the crunchy snow-covered bank. If he hadn't had horns for brains, Alexandra would have smacked him in the head for the rough ride, but she needed his muscles. Are these the people who will remove my horns? Manus asked as he pulled the boat further onto the bank of land. Alexandra didn't want to make any specific promises. She didn't know what the people of the local villa were capable of, and if the horn removal was a practiced skill set, the remoteness of the island led her to believe that Manus wasn't going to get his wish. She just might have to find another way to fulfill her promise to keep him quiet about Nicholas's murder. Have the hollowings worsened since Nicholas's death? She stood up to climb out of the boat. Somehow the boat was more wobbly on land than it was on the water. Interesting. Because she promised him that's all he wants is to get those horns off his freaking head. And he's the type to betray her, I believe, honestly, if it doesn't happen. She doesn't fulfill her promise. Told you, I'm not one of those crazy pilgrims that believes in rituals and sacrifices to the maze. Despite the gruff tone, Manus held out his hand to Alexandra. She thought twice before touching him, but climbing out of boats wasn't something she did every day. Both her feet hit land, and she straightened out her cloak. Have they increased? She asked again with patience. You see the bodies when you walk by the entrance of the maze, do you not? Have they spread outside of town? They're the same. Maybe a little more since your speech about the evolution. More bodies hollowed out since she had given the people hope. How could being on the precipice of evolution create more sacrifices among the people? And human sacrifices at that. More? You're sure? Her ears buzzed with anger. Were the people she led no more than half cranks? She sloshed through the snow a few yards before stopping. She had no sense of intuition when she held this much anger inside. She needed to recite the digits and clear her mind. The hollowings. Silence! She snapped. She went through the digits at her feet as her feet grew numb in her boots. The island was so desolate that even the sun could barely find it. Shivering, she cleared her head and connected to the infinite knowledge of the universe. Is that the infinite glade? Does she know the infinite glade too? Manus's horns may have looked like antennas, but he received no information from the infinite, except infinite stupidity, it seemed. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and exhaled. When she opened her eyes, she saw a path of trees ahead that stood out from the rest. There was no sign of any villa, no signs of fresh footprints or even animal tracks, but it was the way. She moved in that direction with a swish of her cloak, and Manus followed her lead. His loud, nasally, stinky breathing chipped away at her patience. Time passed, trees passed, the brisk air seeped into her depths. Goddess? Manus moved in front of her and pointed ahead, where sunlight reflected off the surface of a window. She smiled before quickly controlling herself. Be on your best behavior and do not speak. It might have been better to have him wait by the boat, but she didn't yet know what help she might need carrying things back from the villa. With any luck, she'd return to the mainland Alaska with arms full of the cure. Armfuls of the cure, not arms full of the cure. With armfuls of the cure. Her foot stepped through something barely stronger than a spider web, but too thin to see. A single click accompanied her pause, and Manus tackled her from the side. Her mouth was suddenly full of snow, something she hadn't done since she was a child. It tasted no better now than it did back then. She spit it out and tried to push herself to stand, but Manus's entire weight was atop her. Don't move, he whispered. Not a moment later, an axe flew out of nowhere, thunking into a nearby tree. The very same tree to the right of where Alexandra had been standing. Her ears buzzed, her vision flashed with fire. A vision so real that she couldn't help but gasp for air. Manus drew his knife and stated the obvious. Guess they don't want visitors. An alarm sounded from a two-story building of stone, only slightly louder than the buzzing in her head, and three women emerged from the upper-level balcony doors. Show yourself, the tallest of the three commanded. She held a gun on them, and even from the ground, Alexandra could see it was enormous. In New Petersburg, they had banned guns years ago, and when the evolution was complete, there wouldn't be a need for such weapons. No more hollowings, no more rituals. Humankind could finally re-advance itself to the builders of old. New technology, new systems, new life. I told you it wasn't a bear. The shortest of the three women's voice traveled clearest through the Alaskan air to Alexandra's ears. Something in the woman's voice struck her as trustworthy. The mist in the air seemed to amplify the words spoken. The tallest woman fired the gun in the air as a warning, as if the axe wasn't enough. She then shouted in an extremely formal manner, "On behalf of the Godhead, we demand that you return to that which you came. This isn't an area to trespass." Nicholas had obviously employed three misfits parading as scientists. Alexandra had no patience for such a show. "I am the Godhead." Theatrics, lots of theatrics. She pushed Manus off. She pushed Manus off her, then climbed to her feet and brushed the snow from her cloak. She'd never been so humiliated and insulted. Apparently, her trip to this remote island was a day of firsts. The first time she was tackled to the ground by a pilgrim, the first time she had been threatened with a gun and an axe, and the first time that anyone in Greater Alaska didn't recognize that she was indeed one of the Godhead. "You must recognize me." She straightened her cloak and forced a smile. She had only ever been idolized and recognized as she walked through the crowds of pilgrims. They not only recognized her, but begged to touch her. The three women on the balcony exchanged nervous, doubtful looks between themselves, and Alexandra grew impatient. "Well, forgive us, but we do not," the shortest of the three had answered. Alexandra tried to remain stoic, but the buzzing in her ears increased and her head spun. Madness! She couldn't lose it. Not now. Not when she was this close. She recited the digits within her mind. "Tell them, Manus. You're speaking to the Godhead." He motioned to Alexandra with the slightest bow. The three women didn't move. They didn't say anything. Alexandra couldn't blame them for wanting proof. In fact, it encouraged her. The Godhead's cloak would speak for her royalty once she cleared it of mud and wet snow. He spoke in a careful but commanding voice. "Please, make us some tea, and I'll show you." After the short one made Alexandra a cup of lukewarm green tea, she displayed her Godhead powers by opening a door in the villa with a wave of her arm. She knew Nicholas would have used the same Godhead technology as the security doors in New Alexander, and the chip in his hand matched that of hers. Had, anyway. Interesting. They have technology implanted in themselves. This is a new development, I believe. At least for me, my understanding of it all. Fear on me, Satyen. Satyen, hi, welcome. Fear on me. Have you been here before? I don't know. I apologize if I don't recognize your name. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you. I hope you're enjoying the story. Here we are. And if you're not, I'm sorry. This is book 2 of the second trilogy in the Maze Runner series. This is set after the original series. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing fantastic. Here, let me pour you some tea since you decided to stop by and say hello. This is for you. Oh, there's also a bit of a delay. I do apologize, but this is just how YouTube works. It does have a bit of a delay. I'm sorry. I apologize. So, it might be 30 seconds or so before we notice. Fear on me. I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry. I do apologize. Mm-mm-mm. I'm gonna keep my eye on that chat a little bit closer now. I'm sorry if you were here and you left. I didn't catch you in time. But hello, hi, welcome. I'm sorry, but I love reading. I do get into it. I'm over here thinking about things that we've read, things that might happen in the future. Right. Okay. I apologize. I think I messed you, but thank you for stopping by. Appreciate you. Appreciate you so much. Yeah, technology in her hand. That's interesting. She's waving her hand to open doors. Alexandra was once naive enough to think the leather Alexandra was once naive enough to think the red leather coffin that held Newt's blood could only be opened by the three pillars of the Godhead when they were all three present. But Nicholas and Mikhail had opened it without her. Opening one of Nicholas's doors without him there now brought a smile to her face. You'll assist us now, I presume. The three supposed scientists looked at Manus and each of his horns as if something didn't make sense. They exchanged glances before the tallest one asked, "Is this Mikhail?" Alexandra wondered for just a moment if she should lie and say yes. Perhaps the presence of two members of the Godhead would be more persuasive. One look at Manus, and anyone could see that he was nothing more than the bottom rung of society. The way he breathed, the way he smelled, the way he stood right now in the presence of so many women, but didn't bend to show the slightest respect. I'm Manus. The horns were a bad idea. Oh my god. The fact that they'd asked about Manus meant that Mikhail had never made it to the villa either. At least not this one. Whatever his plans were that took him on pilgrimages hopefully had nothing to do with her plan of the evolution. She didn't really care what the man busied himself with. It was probably just killing season for him when he left. The cure that reverted his DNA could only change Mikhail so much. It couldn't patch up the cracks in his soul or tame the madness he housed within. Alexandra walked around the room and carefully traced her finger along the glassware of pipettes stored there. Test tubes, petri dishes, beakers, until her eyes found a unit which she could only assume held what she came for. The cure Nicholas had used on her. Goddess, the tallest woman stuttered. We're sorry for the confusion, but Nicholas did not tell us of your arrival. We're not. You needn't worry about Nicholas. Alexandra gently placed the red leather box Manus had brought onto a stainless steel lab table. We're here on a separate accord. She opened the coffin. 5 vials of Newt's blood. You'll use this for a new batch of the cure. Surely they'd be elated at this discovery, but instead she watched as their faces morphed into confusion. They asked for a moment and huddled, whispering fiercely. Say it. What's going on? Alexandra demanded. Short one answered, These can't be Newt's vials. We already have those placed in the safe. The ones Nicholas sent over not that long ago. Her voice was suddenly coated with a condescending tone, as if she knew Alexandra had made a huge mistake and could not go back. How could she have known these weren't Newts? How could Nicholas have replaced them? She pivoted to Manus. She looked back to the coffin. The scientists had to be mistaken. They didn't even look that closely at them. How could they know? Time to recover the situation. No, you're wrong. Nicholas instructed me that these vials, Newt's blood, would be needed. Alexandra watched the tall scientist pick up each vial and examine the labels. Alexandra wondered if Nicholas had ever trusted her with any truth, or if Newt's blood being the cure was just yet another lie. But it felt true. Known to her the way the other information came through her senses, through her cells. Everything in her body vibrated at this confusion. And the three women stood just as confused in front of her. Alexandra wanted to scream and toss the coffin against the glass window, but she restrained herself, embracing the flaring discipline and the principles. She recited the digits in her mind. A4, the shortest of the women, nosed her way into an old scientific log. That, that test subject of the maze trials was Chuck, if I'm correct. She looked up with blank, questioning eyes. Alexandra's ears rang with anger, and she spun around and slapped Manus as if he was responsible for the buzzing alarms within her head. All the anger that trembled within her needed to go somewhere, and it went out of her palm into Manus's cheek. She had slapped him so hard that he spit something onto the floor. You idiot! You brought the wrong case from the study. Manus looked at her with surprise and genuine hurt feelings. Apologies, my goddess, he half-heartedly said. Nicholas is feeling under the weather. Alexandra closed the red leather case and latched it shut. So he must have forgotten that he'd already brought them and given Manus the wrong. She was scrambling for a solution and quickly looked around the small lab. But while we're here, Nicholas was supposed to be back here for our report last week. He didn't show. What illness does he have? All three of the scientists spoke at once. Alexandra searched her mind for another lie. What illness did Nicholas have? She had never once in her 30 years known Nicholas to be under the weather. She replied with the utmost confidence. He has the symptoms of dizziness, vision blackouts, shaking, a loud buzzing in his ears. She spelled out her own growing symptoms. And his thoughts are foggy. Clearly, she pointed to the vials of Chuck's blood labeled as Newt's. It was the middle-sized woman's turn to speak. all mild symptoms of ascension, although she exchanged doubtful glances with the others. Thought Nicholas was well beyond them. Perhaps the northern lights are affecting his inner brain chemistry the same way a full moon does for those who are sensitive. Yes, Alexandra said, but what did they mean by sensitive? What was all of this? I can attest to the full moon causing more disruptions within the village since the full spectrum of the northern lights returned. She placed her hand on her heart. The hollowings have increased, you know. She waited for the women to react, but they didn't. Of course, they didn't have fears of being hollowed. They were too far removed from any society. Alexa had to find what they did fear and play into that. The hollowings are a sign of the end of days. Nicholas believed that once the ritual increased in frequency, it would be out of time to change the fates. He did say there wasn't much time, the short one's turn. Alexandra latched onto that. Which is why you must help me. Share the cure now. Paul spoke next. We can only release the vials to Nicholas, and dispensing the cure is still being worked out by Vila One. They're using the short elbow tall. I am the Godhead. Nicholas is not well. I will dispense them. He said it with a motherly tone. I am the Godhead. Nicholas is not well. I will dispense them. She said it with a motherly tone, but they looked at her as though she were the one with the horns sewed to her head. Tall replied, It's out of no disrespect, goddess. It's simply the protocol. We do not answer to you. We answer to Nicholas. You don't have the clearance here. Alexandra smiled her last fake smile of the day. Nicholas had taught her patience, but even this was a stretch of what she was capable of entertaining. She had been tackled, shot at, and drank the worst tea of her life. The lukewarm tea they just gave her. Poor people. Poor scientists. It was time to get what she came for. She threw all her powers of persuasion and command into her voice. Enough of this. You'll begin answering to me as of right this minute, because Nicholas is dead. He was murdered. Alexandra waited for the apologies and groveling, for them to correct their course and to serve Alexandra Romanov as their one true goddess. But they didn't. Alexandra watched in stunned disbelief as each woman scurried to a different part of the lab and began packing instruments. What was going on here? What was it they feared more than her? She tried to command them, Stop this at once! But she and Manas helplessly watched as they poured beakers full of liquids down the drains and smashed other glass collections. What are you doing? You're destroying it! Paul replied, Yes, matter of safety. We have a plan in place for such a thing, and with your news of the Godhead's assassination, that plan is now in effect. This was absurd, Alexandra thought. What the hell was going on? Middle spoke up now. This is an offset experimental lab, and Villa X was never approved by the Greater Coalition to be doing any of these tests. Alexandra had no choice but to roll with the punches now. It's okay, the evolutionary guards can protect you. You'll be safe. Her offer didn't slow their panic. You can't just give up and walk away from 30 years of research. Small responded, We're not walking away, we're destroying it. In the event that anything happened to Nicholas, this villa was supposed to be destroyed. And Goddess, Short walked over to a safe in the wall after typing in a code. She reached in and instead of pulling out a vial or a collection of manuals or journals or studies, she handed Alexandra a single envelope. This is for you. Alex, stunned into the most unusual silence of her life, looked down at the envelope. Her name had been scribbled across the front in a very familiar handwriting. Nicholas. I knew it. He saw the future. He knew this was gonna happen. What an interesting butthole. What an interesting way to put that. But I don't know, Nicholas. Maybe he was a freaking ass. It seemed like he was kind of kind, but he was also doing all these experiments on people. So he's kind of a butthole, An envelope, her name on it. She, destiny, yet again. We're always where we're supposed to be, right? Part 3. Alexandra held the envelope tightly in her hand. Okay. Yeah, it registered them all the same. Either way I pronounced it. She could already feel the vibration of the letter. Some I told you so from Nicholas about Newt's vials not being in the case, about switching the labels, something about how she should have more patience, but she wouldn't let his words control her anymore. She folded the envelope into three and put it in her cloak pocket. She should have read it. No! Duh. Oh my god. We're going to find out later that she should have read it right now. The women continued to pack up what was left of Villa X, and Alexandra looked at Timanas with a desperate plea. His hand inched closer to his knife. He had no more time for games and counted on the fact that he had killed for his goddess before, and that he might do it again. True to her wishes, the horned man grabbed the tallest woman and held his knife against her throat. But his words surprised her. Stop the emergency shutdown and inject me already. His voice was just as rough as the way he handled the woman's life in front of him. Alexandra could work with this. Not so rough, Manus. These faithful employees of Nicholas are our new friends, and perhaps they'd like to be employed in a new way. She held her palms open, face up, showing she had nothing to hide. Her power of persuasion only needed to work long enough for one of the three women to trust her. Every end is indeed just a new beginning, and while this ends the reign of Nicholas over, while this ends the reign that Nicholas had over your studies, we can begin to now make history together. Don't you want your hard work to be a part of the turning point of humanity? She fed them a gentle smile. We can bring you to New Petersburg, and Manus went off the rails. We can't fit 5 people in that boat. You'll inject me now, here. Alexandra stepped up to him. She squeezed his elbow with 2 fingers, just between the bones where it pinched him enough to lower his knife. Would all the pilgrims of the maze be so selfish? She needed to remember that there would be ways to sort out the worthy from the unworthy. Alaska would be seen as the great frontier once again, ahead of the rest of the world and guiding the way to the future. We can't just inject you. Tall rubbed her neck where the point of the knife had been just moments ago. Alexandra wasn't leaving without getting what she came for. If she couldn't take the vials and the science back with her, she'd settle for taking it in the veins of Manus. She walked backwards to the balcony where the women who greeted them to the island had set her gun down. Her heel slipped for a moment on the tile, and a white odd-shaped marble rolled from under her boot as she bent down for the gun. She picked up the weapon with strength. Listen, she commanded everyone's attention. She didn't want to kill 3 people today, but would pull the trigger if it meant igniting the final stages of the evolution. No, that was madness. Perhaps she needed those mad thoughts to drive her forward. Every person in power since the beginning of days had at one time or another done something that they thought they'd never do, made a choice they'd wished they hadn't needed to, and this responsibility was now in Alexandra's hands. I don't want to hurt any of you. I want us to work together to help the world evolve further than what has been possible. The crank can only be cured physically, but their souls can't be saved. They will always have a monster within them, even when their DNA is reconstructed. He needed to look no further than to Mikhail for that example. But for those of us who are able-bodied, who are ready for more, we can have it. We can have the cure and the evolution within one. A whole new generation without the flare. Can you imagine what the coming generations could do without the fear of the flare holding them back, and with the advanced DNA sequencing? She almost laughed at the pureness of her vision. Everyone in the world living up to an infinite potential. How beautiful the world could be if they would just embrace the cure. The 3 women stood there and said nothing. Alexandra lowered the weapon to reason with them. What will you do and where will you go if the other villa isn't supposed to know of these studies? Well, where will you live and work? Again, silence from the women. So Alexandra answered for them. In New Petersburg, alongside me, with the Godhead. Enough of this bullshit. Give me the cure already. Manus cleared away beakers from the lab table with his hand. Glass shattered on the floor in a million pieces as he laid his arm on the table for an injection. Short responded with surprising confidence. No, we can't. You will, Alexandra demanded, and with the gun still in her hand, the scientists obeyed. You have the flare before they're gone? Tall asked as she inspected him with her eyes. Do I look like I have the flare? Manus replied. What about fevers? Have you had any fevers lately? No. Middle, who was neither good at making tea nor taking orders, and who said the least of any of them, walked over to Alex. This isn't perfected. He's got a 60% chance of falling over dead before the day is over. Alexandra didn't understand what she was talking about. Horns, Short said. He's got predispositions. Alexandra laughed and shook her head. The horns aren't from his DNA, you idiot. He had those sewed on by choice. The soft-spoken scientist looked back at the others before explaining to Alexandra. Not the horns, it's the DNA sequences visible in those who typically make such rash decisions. He'll be fine. Alexandra couldn't care less if Manus lived or died at this point. As long as they left right after his injection, he'd steer her back to the city, and he would either make it back onto shore or he wouldn't. If he lived, then he'd share his story as an example for the pilgrims of the maze to see the potential in the evolution. And if he died, then she would have to regulate the cure accordingly. Short insisted, I will not be responsible for what will happen. If you want to end your life as you know it, fine. The woman readied a syringe and handed it to Manas. Yes, I want a greater life, Manas shouted, and spit flew from his chapped lips. Beyond the precipice of mental power had already changed relatively mild mannered Manas into something Alexandra did not quite recognize. The short woman had an incredible amount of patience. Whatever happens is the result of your own hand, good or bad. We don't have enough studies of how your specific DNA will change, and we should really first take your blood and then. Evolution needs to happen in steps, in slow, methodical steps. Creatures on Earth who have evolved have done so slowly over time, like the environment, and this need not be any different if you want it to be successful. Because this, she motioned to the lab's contents, this has infinite possibilities based on blood type and genetics for each person, and we simply don't know its full effect until we have a catalog of every possibility, and those possibilities are as infinite as the human race. Alexandra shifted the weight of the gun in her hands. Infinite possibilities was not something to be afraid of. It was something those of the future could embrace. If 30 years of studies isn't enough, then what will be? It is time. The evolution is ready. She motioned with the gun for Manas to go ahead, to become part of her evolution. Manas uncapped the syringe and hesitated for only a moment before injecting himself in the crook of his elbow, even as he stood in the middle of all that broken glass and spilled chemicals. Alexandra watched for any change in his face. His jaw muscles tightened and his shoulders twitched. The other women seemed to hold their breath collectively as he observed and waited. His face relaxed, his jaw softened, and Alexa imagined his body cooling from the cure. She remembered the sensation of her own cure way back when, the way her body had felt cold, and just a bit tingly before a warming band of fireworks traveled through her veins, tickling her from the inside out, cleansing her. And as if Manus could hear what she was thinking, he turned to smile at her, his right cheek still red from where Alexandra had slapped him. His bottom middle tooth was missing, but he certainly didn't seem to care. That's what fell out of his mouth, his bottom middle tooth. Okay, Mikhail. So he's not dead. He's bleeding out in the cellar, though. Apparently. Chapter 16: Warpath. Mikhail. The Remnant Nation held only one secret: the identity of the Great Master in the Golden Room of Grief. The Great Master who gave commands, rewards, updates, and promises. The Great Master whom no one had ever seen until today. All of it a practice in pretension. Mikhail walked along the crimson red wall of the empty Golden Room of Grief, with his hood cloaked over his face as he always did. But he planned to reveal his full self to them today. Well, maybe not the little part about him being with a member of the Godhead that they were trained to kill. But he did want the grief bearers to see the fire in his eyes when he spoke of the war. The flames within Mikhail needed to spread their souls and filter down to the hearts of the soldiers. Flames of anger and justice. I thought they stabbed him. He's still alive. His fingers shook as he hovered over them over the alarm that alerted the grief bearers of his arrival. Pain, oh yeah, there it is. Pain radiated from his right kidney, and he wiped the sweat from his forehead. The human body was capable of regenerating and repairing almost any cell, but the human body was also capable of eating itself alive from the inside out. A wonderful fact. Mikhail never knew which path his body might take, one of obedience or one of betrayal. He depended on his body to regenerate healthy cells, but he'd learned after breaking his ankle in the glade years ago that the body stored trauma in different ways. Nicholas forced Mikhail to spend 6 weeks on his couch for constant observation as he explained that sometimes trauma was processed as expected, the body healed, but at other times the impact of one trauma caused an explosion of multiple side effects. The body and the mind are interlinked, dear Mikhail. Nicholas insisted on testing Mikhail's memory and levels of anger each and every day, worried the broken bone might trigger his mental state back into the comfort zone of a crank. Mikhail hated the tests. He hated the time it took to heal. He loathed it all. Mikhail breathed deep for 3 seconds, held his breath for 3 seconds, exhaled for 3 seconds, then hit the alarm. He tried to relax as he moved to the exact center of the room, holding his body in as normal a posture as possible. But the stab wound in his right side weakened him. His legs buckled and his breath labored. Even so, he felt better than he should have. Shock, like the broken ankle on which he'd walked 3 miles to reach Nicholas. He remembered that shock could last for hours or days before the true impact of an injury presented itself. But enough time had passed since the boy stabbed him that Mikhail was sure the kid had missed his main organ. Probably why the little bugger was in hell. Weak strength and poor execution. The Remnant Nation had no room for such weakness. Oh my god. Damn, poor kid getting judged. He's like, he deserves to be down there. He needs to toughen up so he can kill me next time. The men Mikala waited to join him were 12 bearers of knowledge, but they were even weaker than the boy who'd stabbed him. He needed the armies of the nation to be strong while keeping these most senior leaders of the nation weak. It was the secret to any successful government. Power was one thing, strength another. As he waited for the grief bearers, he closed his eyes under the shadow of his hood. Mikhail entered the place in his mind where anything was possible, and all was revealed. The infinite glade, and he exhaled. He conjured in his mind a single simplicable proposal to give the present and future one last chance to change its course before he revealed himself, before he started the war. What was about to be done could not be undone. Ever. The golden path. Interesting. To give the present and the future one last chance to change its course. But it's not going to. The war is inevitable. He asked the infinite glade, "Is it time to execute the war?" And in a flash, the word "yes" in all white glowed within the blackness of his mind. Still knowing this was what he'd prepared for, Mikhail felt conflicted. A similar feeling had come over him when the boy cut the wild pig loose and he watched it run and squeal into the far distance. This confliction between anger and relief mesmerized him because it meant he was, at least for today, more human than Crank. A shuffle of footsteps. He opened his eyes, and the colors of the golden room of grief flooded his vision. A room with red walls and golden accents that almost blinded. He'd created this war room with the red shade somewhere between the color of bright bloodshed and that of darkened dried blood that stained weapons. The gold accents were crafted from the pyrite found alongside deposits of gold, and along with the pyrite there was sure to be arsenic, because as great as gold was, it was always mined alongside clusters of poison. A lesson he'd never forget, no matter how muddled his mind. Anything of value was equally toxic. Mikhail straightened his legs and steadied his breath as the footsteps drew nearer. The great master, one of the bearers of griefs, one of the bearers of grief, exclaimed upon entering. "O highest of high," another grief bearer bowed. Mikhail quickly counted 6 of them, but that wasn't enough, not to ignite the flames of war. "Where are the rest?" "Oh, where are the rest?" He spoke low and slow. "Where are the rest?" He spoke low and slow from the shadows of his cloak, careful not to let on to his pain. "Griever Glane and Griever Barris are missing, along with the priestess." One of the grief bearers stepped forward. It had been decades, and Mikhail still failed to learn their individual names. He didn't care who Glane or Barris were, he just needed the numbers. "And what about the orphans from the cliffs? You haven't promoted anyone in their absence?" It had been his plan for years to promote stronger grief bearers by the time they went to war. He had systems and plans, and the faces of those before him were ones lacking competence. His anger raced through his wounds and pounded at his back. One of them continued. "Griever Haskin and Griever Clarence have sped up the pilgrimages for the orphan soldiers, even starting the rituals at 16 for some of the stronger ones. Then why are there only 6 of you right now?" He emphasized the word now as if it were a command and not a question. "Then why are there only 6 of you right now?" He emphasized the word now as if it were a command and not a question. But he was met with only silence. He'd once again overestimated the bearers to be more than what they were, just like he'd underestimated Alexandra, and now he was in the middle of this mess of evolution without a solid nation to stand before him. "Say something," he demanded. They, a skinny bearer stepped forward. "The orphans have not been coming back." "Oh, when they send them off into their 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, they've just been leaving them. They've been booking it." Hilarious. Mikhail breathed his routine. The cloaked men in front of him were merely tools, nothing more. The entirety of the remnant nation, a box of tools that he would finally use today. Tools that could break and could be thrown away after war. The men before him did not deserve the sacrificial ritual of war. They didn't deserve the feast of a pig, and they didn't deserve to see Mikhail's face. He fixed the hood of his cloak tighter. "We have more problems in the nation than I have time for. Missing grief bearers, holes in the tunnels of hell, allowing orphans to flee. Never mind the missing. This war has begun." He paused as each grief bearer lowered to their knees. At least he still had their will to bend to his own. "Gathered the orphan army and the crank army at once." They do have a secret crank army. The bearers looked at each other with great hesitation. "What is it?" "The army of cranks, oh great master." "What about them?" He slowed. What about them?" He slowed his speech to increase his patience, another trick taught to him by Nicholas. He may as well have been talking to cranks. They are not well. It had been months since Mikhail visited the crank army. Was his memory already failing him? He thought of Nicholas's tests for memory loss after trauma. The pain from his back amplified with his anger. Take me there. Now. Part 2. Within walking distance of the Golden Room of Grief was an unassuming plot of land stretched within the walls of their fortress. On the surface, it was empty and sparse, but 10 feet below, a bunker held over 1,000 cranks. 1,000 cranks, damn. Within the underground was a complex tunnel system filled with safe rooms and areas for supplies. Mikhail let the 6 grief bearers walk before him so they wouldn't see the terror in his cloak. They walked like cowards, their backs stiff with fear. You're sure we all need to go down there? The skinny one turned to ask. Mikhail simply nodded and motioned to the moss covered hatch. One by one, the 6 men lowered themselves into the bunker's entrance. He's gonna feed them to the cranks. I don't think, I mean, maybe he will, but I don't think he can, right? He still needs them to control the orphan armies. Okay. But man, I think he's gonna lose his temper and he's gonna feed them to the cranks. One by one, the 6 men lowered themselves into the bunker's entrance as if they were lowering themselves to certain death. The grief bearers of the remnant nation were no better than the starving orphans in hell, but the cloaks made them think otherwise. Cloaks of power. None of the bearers actually held any power. No, Mikhail made sure of that. They only knew as little or as much as he deemed to share during his masked visits to the Golden Room. He climbed down the hatch into the tunnel, walked to the lift. Sir, the crank army is very hungry. The skinny grief bearer followed too closely. Mikhail's loss of blood made him dizzy. Hunger for war is a good thing. He shouldn't have needed to tell the grief bearers that. No, they are not. How do I put this? The bearers stepped forward, ahead of the entrance to the bunker's shaft. Satisfied. Then feed them more. Mikhail moved past him into the small elevator, but one of the men stopped him from pushing the lever to descend. I saw one eat their own arm yesterday, sir. The grief bearer let go of Mikhail's cloaked arm. They're even the cranks are changing. They have this insatiable hunger. Their bellies. Mikhail didn't believe it. Self cannibalism? Autosarcophagi? Cranks were cannibalistic, but they weren't going to eat themselves. Sarcophagy. Cranks were cannibalistic, but they weren't going to eat themselves for flair's sake. No animal would. Lowered the lever of the lift he lowered the lever of the lift once all the 6 grief bearers were inside. He lowered the lever of the lift once all 6 grief bearers were inside. The elevator clanked and grinded down, gears shifting and turning until they arrived at the bunker level. The others collectively took a deep breath as the gated door of the lift opened. The wound caused a clammy heat to the coat of Mikhail's body, and he welcomed the cooler air from the mine shaft. The smell, however, he could have done without. It smelled of stomach acid and bile. Had the grief bearers not been keeping up with the maintenance of the army? They're chained in groups of 8? Mikhail asked. 8 was the sacred number, part of the digits Alexandra recited. She clung to those numbers for her sanity, and soon he would deliver her an army of 8. Yes, sir. A grief bearer who'd brought a notepad and pen cleared his throat. For the most part, he clicked the pen nervously. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. The sound of it made Mikhail's eye twitch. What the hell does that mean? They're either shackled together, ready to fight, or they're not. He stepped out of the lift onto the bunker floor, suddenly assaulted by the sounds of chains dragging, metal on concrete, clank, clank, clank. Noises that somehow seemed both loud and quiet at the same time. Harsh and angry sounds coming from the back hallways out of view. Soldiers, report! A grief bearer shouted, but only a dragging and clanking answered him. Soldiers, report! Still no answer. Still no answer. Mikhail had never come down to the bunker without one orphan soldier being at the lift and another one standing guard in the hallway. Every entrance point to a path within view should have had a soldier standing near it. Something's not right. The skinniest of the grief bearers positioned himself at the back of the elevator, ready to return to the surface. Not a chance. Mikhail needed to know what was going on with these cranks. Maybe the orphans were already moving them to the bergs. Started to walk toward the loudest of the sounds coming from a hallway off to the right, and realized he was walking alone. He turned to the grief bearers behind him. If you're going to be cowards, I'll feed you to the army as the sacrificial war feast. How's that sound? Mikhail hid his own pain and doubt. Slowly, 5 grief bearers stepped forward. The skinniest, the weakest one, pulled the lever to go back up. The gears clanked as the mechanical sounds lifted him away. Some people might call that dastardly. Griever Banks, one of the men shouted at the elevator shaft. Long live the cure, the skinny, scared grief bearer said as he rose from view. Mikhail seethed. The cure would live, yes, but the bearer who turned his back on the remnant nation would not. One way or the other, that idiotic coward would die a painful death, reserved for those who betrayed the nation. Mikhail grimaced with pain as he walked from the main lobby of the bunker to the hallway. Get both armies together. Make note of the coordinates, he said with an incessant. He said to the incessant pen clicker. 56.8125 degrees north and 132.99574 degrees west. Wait, say it again. Wait, say it again. The man scrambled to keep up. Mikhail took a slow, deep breath. 56.8125 degrees north and 132.9574 degrees west. He walked toward the sounds of dragging metal. Pack the bergs full of cranks. You'll land on the exact coordinates and set them to march in on foot from the south. The orphan army and the airstrikes will happen from the north, and the two will meet in the middle to destroy the city of gods once and for all. Grief bearers looked to each other with something that could only be described as dark excitement, all wide eyes and suppressed grins. Do you have any questions? The clanking noises got louder. There had to be at least one group of cranks loose from the pits. We have the coordinates. We have the orders. We just need to know the target day for the attack. Sunday, he hid his own smile. The holiest of days. The goddess will address her people in the square after Mass. When you see a woman more beautiful than Alaska herself, that is the goddess. He never wanted Alexandra to hurt, just destroyed, and there are several ways to destroy a person without physical harm. But the way she'd boasted on and on of taking Nicholas's head, he couldn't afford a second thought. Kill her however you see fit. Long live the cure, the grief bearers said in unison. Mikhail turned a corner in the hallway and saw an unnatural sight. A group of cranks shackled together in a line of 8, working themselves out of chains by chewing at their own limbs. It took his mind a moment to wrap around the situation in front of him. He had never feared the cranks before, but the wound in his back made him weak, vulnerable. In counting the flare-ridden, bloodied bodies before him, he only counted 6 still attached to their wrist and ankle shackles, 2 gaping holes in the link. Loose chains dragged the concrete. 2 cranks were loose in the bunker. Get to the armory room, Mikhail shouted as he stumbled backwards, not able to take his eyes off the sight of their madness, their desperation to be free. Like caged animals, they would rather chew off every limb than stay enslaved. The armory room had a full supply of guns, knives, ammo, and hand grenades, but his right leg suddenly gave out from the spreading pain, like something poked him from inside the wound. He screamed despite himself. Great master! One of them exclaimed. But the cloaked men didn't have the instincts of orphans who trained their whole lives. They were organizers and politicians, didn't have the minds of soldiers to guard, protect, kill. Mikhail spun around within an inch of his face. Mikhail spun around, and within an inch of his face was a snarling crank, ripe with rage. Is he gonna die here now? Poor guy. All of this stuff, but they already have their orders. Are they still gonna go through with it? Widened eyes with no soul behind them, only blood dust. Such smells, every bodily fluid combined into one, spit, bile, blood. The crank lifted his half-chewed wrist toward Mikhail, but he grabbed it, held it back, held it tight. The crank gargled a scream. Excuse me. Give me your pen, Mikhail shouted. He reached for it, grabbed it from the helpless grief bearer, clicked it, then stabbed the crank in the neck, right in the artery. At one place, get them there and they go down. Monster dropped to its knees, Mikhail still holding its wrists, detached from its body. Great master, you've been hurt, a grief bearer cried from behind, finally observing Mikhail's wound, but he wouldn't allow this to weaken his plan. Pack the cranks into the bergs now. He forced himself to his feet and moved swiftly toward the armory. Can't afford to show weakness, champ. Part 3, Minho. One time, Skinny found an orphan all the way out in a field, dead. Minho appreciated company while he steered the ship, but Orange was not going to convince him that that one dead soldier in a field meant there was an army of cranks. Saw the crank army? Well, no, the guy was dead. Skinny never reported it. He wasn't supposed to be out there. Then how does a dead soldier in a field equal a whole army of cranks? Because, Orange took a deep breath. Guinea said the body was hollowed out. Hollowed out? He shrugged. A single crank could have done that, or a pack of crank wolves. You know, they didn't know if crank wolves existed. But if they did, it would make more sense than an army of trained cranks. Crank wolf? Okay, I need to know if that exists. I'm sorry. It's so funny. It doesn't appear that that's a thing. Maybe in the next book. That might just be setting up something for the next book. Maybe we'll see a crank wolf in the next book. It's so funny. So freaking funny. Okay. Hollowed out, he shrugged. A single crank could have done that, or a pack of crank wolves. Minho didn't know if crank wolves existed, but if they did, it would make more sense than an army of trained cranks. Don't go telling her all these crazy stories, okay? He nodded toward Roxy, approaching the two orphans at the captain's bench. Stories about what? Roxy asked. Orange shook her head. Nothing. Everything working okay? Roxy asked as she looked over the controls. Minho nodded. He figured most of them out. Steering a ship on water was a hell of a lot easier than steering a berg in the air. But still, being out in the ocean made him nervous. He kept the maze cutter within sight of the coastline so that he could anchor in at night. Orphan found that being behind the captain's wheel required only one thing: focus. Like watching the distant tree line from the walls of the remnant nation. Patience, balance. Watching the surface of the water, listening for the sounds of the ship to change. He tried to ignore the things he didn't know, like why the rudder of the ship kept pulling to the left, but it was getting worse by the hour. The alignment's off. It wasn't this bad when we started. Something's making it pull. Something might be stuck in the rudder, yeah. He steered slightly to the right in order to go straight. Think you can take over while I look at the mechanics? Orange nodded. Think you can take over while I look at the mechanics? Orange nodded. I can help too, Roxy said. Minho scoffed. No offense, Roxy, but I've seen you in a truck. I don't need you finding every bad wave and hitting every whale. Oh my god, burned. Hey, she almost sounded offended. I'll have you know, my grandpa taught me how to canoe. Yeah, that's right. It's a little different, but his first rule, she held a single finger in the air, was to respect the water. That's a good rule, Minho replied. You can help Orange respect the water by keeping watch for anything ahead of us. Ain't nothing in this water but water. Roxy looked out at the gentle ocean waves. No other ships, no whales, nothing to look at. Kind of boring, gotta be honest. Wait, Orange took over the captain's wheel. You knew your parents and your grandparents? Tears of soldiers and generations of grief bearers were about as close to a family tree as orphans from the remnant nation ever got. Minho wanted to hear the answer. Another bolded word. Understood. Roxy nodded with pride. I knew my grandparents and my dad, although wouldn't exactly say I knew him. I met him and we spent lots of time together, but I never got to really know him. She stuffed her hands in her pockets. Minho thought about what that meant for Roxy to have had someone like that in her life, but still never really know them. My mom, she died some horrible death that no one loved me enough to talk about. Oh, Orange turned the captain's wheel to the left as she glanced at Roxy. Sorry. Minho remembered Roxy telling him about her mom before, but it must have really bothered her, never knowing the truth. Maybe they loved you a lot and that's why they didn't tell you. You know, if it was horrible. He stepped over and corrected Orange's steering back to the right to overcompensate for the pull to the left. Sometimes what we know, it changes what we knew, and maybe they didn't want that for you. He understood, old, this by how much he'd kept from Roxy and the others about himself, his true self, because he knew it would change what they thought about him. Roxy was lost in thought. She may not have been his real mom, but wanted to get to know her, really know her as much as he could before they got to Alaska and things changed. He could look at the rudder later. Tell us about your grandpa, he sat on the captain's bench. He taught you about the water? What else? Roxy sat down next to him and pulled her legs up to her chest as if she was about to tell a proper yarn. He collected stories from all over, books, pamphlets, almanacs, whatever he could find, and he'd memorized those stories. He traveled the country and towns on horseback to find more. She laughed. Couldn't picture it. Your grandpa went around on a horse just to tell stories? Why is that so hard to believe? She scrunched her eyebrows. Didn't mean to offend her. He just didn't get it. Traveling to give a warning he understood because he'd killed many people doing so. Traveling to give aid was another excuse he'd heard often before shooting arrows at trespassers. But traveling to share fairy tales seemed less respectable. It seemed like an unworthy reason to die. What? Spit it out. Whatever you're thinking. Roxy frowned. He wasn't sure how to share all that without telling her how many men he'd killed who had been traveling with greater missions. He looked at Orange, but she was only watching the ocean, as she should as she should when at the wheel. But it didn't help him find the right words, because there's no honor in doing so. Honor? Roxy spat it out as if she'd never heard the word before. The reason, the purpose, a need that's greater than your own, the orphan explained as best he could. It's not useful, is what he's getting at, right? He didn't, but it is, because entertainment's useful. He didn't want to say that telling stories wasn't worth dying for. He knew Orange would understand his perspective. Roxy shook her head back and forth. Connection is the purpose. Without stories, we're all just barely living. Stories help us understand life so we can live. Stories are the glue that holds our bones together. Stories of family, stories of old, stories of make believe. Didn't that nation of yours ever teach you anything? We have rumors in the Remnant Nation. They're like stories, right? Orange asked. And Minho tried not to make a face. Oh, poor Orange and Minho. Tell us one of yours. She didn't take her eyes off the small waves ahead. Oh, there were so many. Roxy tilted her head back as if looking to the cloudless sky might help jog her memory. People used to come from many towns over just to hear his tales. The ones about the ancient gods were the stories people loved the most. What ancient gods? Minho asked. The Elohim. He gazed lazily at Orange, but she looked just as confused as he did. What is that? The god with the angels and the devil. Roxy waved her hands in front of her as if that could help them place it. The only god they'd ever heard of while growing up was the Godhead, and those weren't stories about how to worship them. No, only ways to kill the Godhead. The flare was our devil, he said, and our god was the cure. Still is, Orange agreed. Roxy huffed. The cure is just a thing. You can't worship a thing. Minho knew plenty of people who did just that. She continued. Most people of old worshipped a god, but not everyone had the same one. Different names, different origin stories, different lands and planets the gods came from. But one thing that never really changed was the devil. Evil remained a constant in all tales of old. Orange steered the ship, and Minho watched to make sure she continued to favor the right side. To him, evil was evil, no matter what shape, body, or thing it possessed. The flare would always be his devil, even after he joined the Godhead, and the evolution was needed to stop that devil. Does Guy have a name? He asked to appease Roxy. Iblis, she paused. God commanded all the spirits to bow before man, which he'd created from his own breath. But the spirit named Iblis refused. He wouldn't bow to anyone but God. He didn't believe man could be a god. Kinda like the Godhead, Orange contributed. People who think they're gods and can control the cure. What would she think of Minho when she found out his personal mission in Alaska was to join the so-called Godhead? To become one of them, despite the rank he was born into. I agree with this Iblis fella. Men aren't gods. Roxy seemed pleased with the conversation, but by not bowing, Iblis offended God, so much so that he was cast into hell. Minho and Orange looked at each other with wide Minho and Orange looked at each other with wide eyes. They both understood hell long before these grandpa stories. They had been there before. It was the lowest level of the Remnant Nation fortress, a place of torture and cruelty, a place to which Minho vowed never to return. Oh, we know hell, Orange said. Yeah, Minho added. We've both been there. No, 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 Roxy laughed. But if she had ever been to their hell, she wouldn't have. Hell is a place you go to after you die, where the devil rules his scary little kingdom. I don't believe in it, not literally anyway, but some people do. Roxy could say hell was a made up place all she wanted to, but it was real. All too real. So, Orange thought out loud, this Iblis guy, he's in charge down there? Sent there, then ruled it, Roxy paused. Still does, I suppose. Stepped in to correct Orange's staring again. I got it. I get it. I got it. I got it, she said. Go check the rudder already. He nodded. Yeah, he checked the rudder. Anything but this devil nonsense. He thought about everything Roxy had said as he walked toward the other end of the ship. It seemed like every generation on the earth had a different idea of God, and every generation their own idea of a devil. He had his own beliefs and would stick to them. Men could be gods, no need for a heaven or hell. Maybe those left back in the remnant nation already thought of Minho as a devil for not returning. They'd surely think it when he joined the Godhead. It didn't matter if they did. He'd never go back to find out. Interesting. But it's also interesting. He thinks that he's unique, but it seems like all of these orphans are, coming up with names and leaving. Maybe they're all on their way to freaking Alaska to go and join the Godhead. Hmm. Super interesting. And Mikhail being the one who created the remnant nation so he could fight the Godhead at some point. The whole point is to fight the Godhead. Nicholas had been planning for a long time, it seemed. Interesting. So interesting. And then so the last book is called The Infinite Glade. I wonder what we're gonna learn when we get there. What secrets does the Infinite Glade hide? Because that's where they get all their answers from. Godhead. Chapter 17. Blind Luck. Part 1. Isaac. It had been over a day since they watched the maze cutter disappear beyond their horizon, but Isaac couldn't stop thinking about everyone on board. His only solace lay in the fact that he trusted Minho more than he'd ever trusted Kletter. Think they'll be okay? Jackie asked quietly as they walked south along the coast. Yeah, Isaac rubbed the grass braided bracelet around his wrist that Sedina had made him. They'll be okay. He wanted to fill the silence that Cohen and Old Man Frypan left open. Isaac didn't blame Frypan for not wanting to go to Alaska. To everyone else, the stories of old were just stories. But to Frypan, they were memories, painful, terrible memories. There'll be something, the old man added. Long as they don't come across any grievers, they'll be fine. Isaac couldn't tell if he was joking. Cohen coughed. They'll come back to join us soon. Once they reach the Godhead, we'll be their next stop. You think it'll happen that quickly? Jackie quickened her step with this news. Isaac wondered if Miss Cohen was going to tell the others what she'd told him, that everyone from the island was a test subject, not just Sedina. Well, except for Isaac and the old man, who were last minute additions, it made sense now why Cohen had hesitated to let them come on board. Surely Prypan didn't look at manipulation kindly, not about test subjects at least, with the infamous tattoo still visible on his neck. What do you think will happen when we get to the villa? Isaac directed his question to Cohen in an attempt to invite the whole truth to the rest of their group. He'd kept the secret of her infection and he didn't want to carry another one. We'll introduce ourselves and our lineage and we'll ask them for help, Cohen answered matter of factly, as if it would be that simple. Frypan chimed in. Nobody's gonna help us if they don't see any help in it for themselves. True that. True enough. True that, right? The trees on the path started to look weak the further they went on, more and more bare. Something was eating their leaves or infecting their leaves. You don't have to go in the villa, you and me, Jackie said, turning to Frypan. We can just stay in the woods until they. Nah, we'll go in. If there's something in my old blood that can help you recover, Miss Cohen, I'll help. This brought an honest smile across Cohen's lip. Thank you. Doesn't look like the flare, he added. A new variant, maybe, but it's not the maze forsaken flare, that's for sure. That's good. That's a little bit of something, like unfortunately it's also the potential to be worse, but it's not the flare, and there's a chance that it's not as deadly, things get weaker and they adapt and but who knows? We'll find out soon enough. Surely soon enough we shall find out. Isaac's shoulders relaxed at hearing that. He had nothing to compare Cohen's symptoms to in his mind, but that rash looked bad, and the woman's face had begun to droop, as if the sickness in her body pulled her down in every possible way. Anyone need a rest? Isaac asked, looking back specifically at the adults. If his legs were tired, then Cohen's and Frypan's had to feel twice as worn. I'm good, Cohen said. A little farther, old man Frypan added. How is it that I'm already How is it that I'm ready for a break and you two aren't? Jackie blew out a heavy sigh and laughed. I'll walk all day if it means I'm not swaying on that stupid boat, but I don't think I'm in quite the shape as you two. Fry pan flexed a bicep. Back home, I walked 4 miles every morning, up the coast and back around. No wonder he had so much energy. When we get back home, I'm doing that walk with you, Jackie said. Every day. Me too, Isaac smiled, thinking of home. He wasn't sure they'd ever make it back to the island, but he was relieved to have the others. Even if something happened to Cohen, Isaac wouldn't be alone. Jackie might not have the stomach for a boat ride, but in Isaac's opinion, she was the strongest islander of the group, even stronger than Dominic. If they ran into cranks again, he'd trust Jackie to kill them with her bare hands if needed. What is that? Cohen pointed to a brown lump on the dirt path up ahead. Isaac squinted at the strange blob. He walked ahead to investigate and leaned over. It was a dead bird. This is not good. This is not good, chat. There's dead. Everything's dying where they are. There's all kinds of dead vegetation, that animals and plants. This is not. This is not a good sign. Just a sparrow. Jackie joined him and bent over to touch the bird. Wait, don't touch it, Isaac said. It might have a disease. I'm not touching the bird. There's a little someone I wanted to say hi to. She motioned to the tiny, wiggly red and orange thing crawling on the dirt behind the bird. An amphibian. Cohen had started another coughing fit and took the opportunity to stop and rest. Hi, little guy. What's your name? Old man Frypan took a look. That there is a big old salamander. Cohen coughed and coughed to clear her throat. It's silly, but maybe it's a sign. Isaac looked down at the dead bird and then back to Cohen. He didn't want her to think that she'd soon be dead on her back, beak to the sky, too. No, everything will be okay. Exactly. It's a good sign. She managed a smile, but her forehead creased like a frown. Isaac had no idea what she was thinking about. We have these old books in Congress, written accounts by the immunes, sharing their knowledge and memories. And in one of those books, someone called a salamander a newt, said not to eat them. I'd starve before I ate this cute thing. Jackie pet the creature on the top of its head with the pad of her finger. Little Newt, Isaac said, and it earned him an honest smile from Old Man Frypan. That's a fine name for anyone, he added. Hear that? Jackie asked the tiny salamander. You're a Newt, little Newt. She stood up and placed the new pet on her shoulder. The group, their group had just added another member, one that made each one of them smile. Maybe the little guy even had a bit of luck in him. Isaac wasn't superstitious, but he'd welcome any good fortune they could get, especially since the brown sparrow was the second dead bird they'd found in as many days. 2 dead birds in 2 days. Damn. Not a good sign, Chan. 2. Their days had found a routine, and it helped that Isaac's mind and it helped their days had found a routine, and that helped Isaac's mind from going completely bonkers, or wonky bonky as Trish would say if she were here. Cohen's rash was getting wider, and its red rawness peeked out from behind her scarf. Their plan was to retrace their steps to the house where Isaac and Sedina had been kidnapped, where Clether was killed, and then to follow the streets and houses up the hillside until they saw people. Clether never told anyone what the villa looked like, did she? Isaac asked. No, that woman had way too many secrets, Jackie said bitterly. Isaac looked over at Cohen for her answer, but as a woman with too many secrets herself, he knew she wouldn't say anything. Miss Cohen, he prompted her, did Clether say anything to you about the villa before we got on the ship? Maybe at your meeting? Cohen blinked more slowly than usual, like her body and muscles were exhausting their strength to keep her legs walking. I don't know. I don't think so. Isaac wasn't convinced. Cletcher had told her about needing control subjects and more people than Sedina from the island, and he was sure Cletcher had revealed something else, things that Cohen either didn't remember or chose not to share. Jackie picked up another wiggly insect. I think he likes worms the best. Isaac watched little Newt slurp up the even smaller creature. He definitely is not a vegetarian. Jackie rubbed her mouth. Ew. What happened? He stopped as she spit something out and scraped her at her tongue. Bug just flew right into my mouth. Gross. Frypan looked concerned. Did it sting you? No, Jackie said, still scraping. Here, Isaac handed over his canteen. Wasn't a murder hornet, was it? Probably with my luck. She spit again and then took a sip of water. Frypan stole away their attention. Hey, look, I remember that up ahead. That building. He pointed at it. He pointed, and it only took a second for Isaac to recognize it too. It was the first building they'd seen upon arriving from the island, a true skyscraper surrounded by many others. Only a short journey now to the house where Letty Timon had slit Clether's throat. Thinking about that put Isaac on edge. He couldn't let his guard down as they walked on, toward the same place where everything had gone wrong before. He reached for the knife Minho had given him. This time around, if someone taunted them from a creepy house, Isaac would be ready. Interesting. And then, so they were part of the remnant nation, if we're interpreting things correctly. Timon and Letty. Part 3, Ximena. Gastar Salvia. Gastar Saliva. Gastar Saliva. Gastar Saliva. A waste of saliva and a waste of breath, as her abuela would say. There was no use in telling Carlos what she felt to be true about her mom and his wife, Dad. His poor, young, beautiful wife, who he'd hoped to have children with someday. Carlos's measure of hope would always outweigh anything else in his mind. And their trip was already depressing enough. Eating snakes, sleeping in the desert, moving camp every morning, the heat, the unbearable heat. Do you want the snake skin to make something? Carlos asked as he packed up their cooking tools. Dimana declined with a quick shake of her head. The men, I want to see. Can I make it pop up? No, it's not popping up. The men, Zimena. It's not on on the text to speech. Zimena, Zimena. How would I? Oh, there it did. Zimena, Zimena. Yeah. Oh, I'm so good. I am so good. Zimena. 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 Okay, that time it came out with a Z. Zimena. 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 So consistently getting with a Z now. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't be doing these things while I'm supposed to be reading to you. All right, moving on. You want the snakeskin to make something? Carlos asked as he packed up their cooking tools. Ximena declined with a quick shake of her head. There would be plenty more snakes on their path if she wanted to fashion something. What's the matter? You've been quiet. Nada. Nothing's wrong. Up until the clear feeling she'd had about her mom being dead, Ximena had spent every single day in the desert looking at the horizon, hoping she'd see her mom and Mariana walking toward them. And then they'd walk faster. Then maybe they'd run. But she should have known that it wasn't hope which brought them out here. It was her intuition that something was wrong. Manera de ver, as her abuela would say, her way of seeing. You have a vision and not telling me? You having a vision and not telling? Are they godheads? Are you having a vision and not telling me? Carlos asked as he flicked the snake skin aside. She shook her head and kicked the rock, then started walking north again on the worn path. No, it wasn't a lie. She had a feeling, not a vision. They were two very different things. Carlos nodded as he joined her. They had a map to the villa if needed, but so far the path was clear enough. Many people back home in the village had intuition in various forms. Carlos might too, if he wasn't so clouded by hope. Hope, it had a way of blanketing all things as some big glorious lie until they morphed into what a person wanted them to be. Seers, on the other hand, embraced the pain of truth and saw things how they weren't. Ximena looked over at Carlos as they walked. Ximena looked over at Carlos as they walked. There we go. Ximena, just need to like really dig into it. Ximena looked over at Carlos as they walked. He was a strong enough man to protect her from almost anything that came along, anything but the truth. There's something bothering you, he said when he noticed her gaze. You're never this quiet in the morning. He was right. Typically, she thought out loud. Ximena softened. Just thinking about what will happen when we get there is all. The man of. So if I don't say it, Ximena. Ximena. Okay. We gotta say it. Otherwise, it comes off as the man of. Ximena softened. Just thinking about what will happen when we get there is all. Carlos stopped. Don't be all mad at Annie when we see her. She can't help it that these missions go on longer than expected. She can help it. She's the lead on the team. She's literally the only one who can help it. Carlos picked up his feet again, but she wasn't letting him leave this behind. Her mom and Mariana were 2 months past the latest point in time when the group had assured they'd be back. But the absent minded Annie always conveniently forgot the promises she'd made to those back home, like when their mothers, daughters, and wives would return. Ever since Ximena was little, her abuela had taught her how to trust herself and why she shouldn't trust Annie from the villa. And I don't want to have to go back and read this every Ximena every day. Despite this, Ximena never actually thought Annie would get her mom or Mariana killed. Ximena, Amanda. Despite this, Ximena never actually thought Annie would get her mom or Mariana killed. So why was she feeling that way now? Ellas están muertas, her gut whispered. Ellas están muertas. I don't think this is going to translate because that's Spanish. And this is trying to get it to say English. Ellas, ellas, ellas están muertas. Assistant worked in us. Ellas están muertas. Ellas están muertas. No, it's not. There's no way. There's no way it's going to pick it up. Ellas están muertas. Ellas están muertas. His assistant. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way. Um, they're dead. Her gut whispered. Pero en español. No, it's not gonna. Yeah, it's not better and español. Yeah, but in Spanish, they are dead. Her gut whispered, as her mind searched for any feelings that came with names from home, who left at the same time as her mom. Francisco, Manuel, Anna. She concentrated on each name as she and Carlos walked, but no imprint came to her. Donde estás? But she got nothing. Not even colors of their auras came through. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So donde estás? It says, but it means where are they? But she got nothing. Not even colors from their auras came through. There had never been a time in Ximena's childhood when she'd been separated from her mom where she couldn't at least feel her. There had never been a time in Ximena's childhood. There had never been a time in Ximena's childhood when she'd been separated from her mom where she couldn't feel, at least feel her out there, wherever she was. Ximena didn't know how to explain it to anyone else, but she couldn't feel her mother anymore. If something was killing the rabbits, something could be killing people, half cranks, or healthy humans who weren't cranks, but might as well be. Humans evil enough to annihilate her whole village. Or there could be another virus, one that her homeland couldn't withstand. A virus that started with the dead black jackrabbits in the desert. Annie isn't. Carlos gave a big sigh. She's not to blame for everything. He looked back at Ximena to make sure she'd heard the last part. But she didn't believe it. It was painfully obvious that Annie had been responsible for every last thing that went wrong in their village in the last 25 years, and Ximena had only been alive for 16 of those. Savannah. If Carlos wanted to ignore, she would let him continue to ignore it. You're so much like your mom right now. What? Why? Ximena hated that it had been so long since her mom agreed to work off site for the villa that she was already starting to forget things about her. She always thought she was smarter than everybody else. Carlos shook his head as if being intelligent in a world full of half cranks was a bad thing. So what if her brain was more human than most humans? Better than the better that than the brain of an animal, a monster, or a liar like Annie. Ximena itched at her neck. The mosquitoes were terrible in the desert. Sorry. She didn't know what else to say. It wasn't that she thought she was smarter than others. She simply just was. She almost always knew things before they came to fruition, especially when it came to her family and their village. A storm that came unexpectedly out of season and wrecked the roof of each of the south station. A sick elder on the west end who went blind from eating berries. And the most important one of all, her mom foresaw an eagle coming to the land and bringing with it truth and awareness. An eagle moved itself into their village 2 years ago, perched on the highest of trees. No one else understood its importance as deeply as Ximana's mom. Ximana was still trying to figure out what the prophecy meant, but for the big, beautiful, bald eagle. Sorry. Ximana was still trying to figure out what the prophecy meant. Ximena. Ximena. Ximena was still trying to figure out what the prophecy meant, but the big, beautiful, bald eagle hunted in the field across from her house every day and watched over her village every night. Ximena's mom sewed the design of an eagle into everything she laid hands on, and she made her daughter promise that she would do her best to sow truth into the world for the rest of her days. Interesting. Minho. Orphans certainly weren't gods, but orphans weren't no devils either. Minho struggled to give himself a place within Roxy's grandfather's story, but it was difficult to do because he didn't know his creator. He never met his parents. You fix that steering issue? Roxy asked, motioning to the wheel. Maybe, Minho said. He tinkered below for an hour or so without knowing exactly what connected to what, but something might have worked. He let go of the wheel to see which direction it favored, and the ship slowly started to veer left again. Nope. That's okay. You've been blessed by the gods, she pointed to the sunset. What are you talking about? They used to say pink sky at night is a sailor's delight, she laughed. Are you getting tired of all these stories of grandpas yet? Minho smiled, something still relatively new to him. He liked that she called him grandpa and not my grandpa. Never. He kind of liked hearing someone's family history, even if it wasn't his own. And he especially liked knowing that more than just pain, torture, and disease could be passed down from generation to generation. Well, you've had just about the best sailing weather possible, and the sky promises you another good day tomorrow. Roxy put her arm around his shoulders. Want me to take over? Not a chance. You're finally getting me back for not letting you drive the truck. I'm getting you back, and I'm getting us there safely. She wasn't wrong. He did like being in control. Roxy nodded and handed him some water. He let her hold the captain's wheel while he took a sip. Maybe he shouldn't ask the next question, but he couldn't help himself. Something about seeing the boat make wave after wave, ripple after ripple, made him realize that every action had a reaction. He needed to know. How did Grandpa die? Roxy's face wrinkled up like a berry that hung on the vine too long. You soldiers get a little morbid, don't you? No, I mean, he paused, tried to ask what he really needed to know most. Did he die at home, warm in bed? The orphan set the water down. Or did he go for one of his travels one day and just never come back? Roxy didn't respond for a moment. I need to know, he said with a shrug, just like you need to know about your mom. I just do. Roxy let go of the captain's wheel. Are you worried you killed him? All the way out in the remnant nation of yours? She shook her head as if that were impossible, but she didn't know just how many men the orphan had killed. He swallowed hard. We've shot lots of trespassers. He hung his head, couldn't bear the thought of it. Grandpa died long before you were even born. She put her hand on Minho's shoulder, but it didn't make him feel any better. Someone in the remnant nation still could have killed him. At home? Minho asked. Roxy shook her head slowly. He died while traveling. Minho knew it. He took the controls back over and she stepped aside. But his life wasn't just his. His life was also in each and every one of those books he read. He lived hundreds of lives, and he died hundreds of deaths every time one of those stories ended. She took a deep breath. He lived a long, good life. Minho couldn't let it go. But it's possible he wandered near the fortress. She finally gave in. I guess anything's possible. He stared at the ocean ahead, the vast, empty ocean. Their water went on so far that not even something as big as the remnant nation could control it. Minho? The orphan looked at her. Why is this bothering you so much? He wasn't sure exactly. Something about being on the other side of the wall made life feel different. Waves, ripples. The more days he spent training himself not to kill people, the more he started to regret the times he did. Anyone who touched our borders, we were instructed not to let them say more than 3 words before shooting. He'd always broken that rule. He let them say a sentence or two because every man deserved to speak before they died. Why only 3 words? Just a rule. Lots of rules. Minho looked over his shoulder to make sure Orange wasn't on deck to hear. I'd always let them say more, though. Trespassers would either insist they weren't infected or they'd beg the nation's help for someone who was infected, someone they loved. Everyone, they all had a story to tell. Foxy sighed. At least you were different enough to recognize such a thing. Minho wanted a change of subject, anything to stop Roxy from picturing him killing trespassers. What about the books? Your grandpa's books? He asked awkwardly. Oh, I still have them. Well, had them. Most of them are back at the house where you found me. The orphan remembered seeing lots of books on shelves when she welcomed him in for a meal. Somehow, thinking of Roxy leaving all of her grandfather's stories behind felt like more of a death than all of the intruders he'd killed put together. He left all his books behind to come with me? Of course, Roxy said. Those stories will be there. I know most of them by heart anyway. But in this story, she hugged Minho tighter than anyone had ever put their arms around him before. She hugged him like Minho had seen Dominic hug Jackie before they left her behind. His reflexes tightened. He fought the urge to twist her wrists and flip her to the ground. In this story, it's a true adventure, and in this adventure, I get to have a son. The orphan named Minho would never get tired of hearing her say that. And instead of flipping her and breaking her arm like every instinct within him screamed to do, he did the exact opposite. The orphan hugged her back. What a nice moment. do 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 na 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 na. Chapter 18, Losing Grip, Part 1, Mikhail. All right, so we're back in the Remnant Nation. Flying the Berg back to Alaska was more difficult than he'd imagined. The stab wound near his kidney had stopped bleeding, but the wound in his mind only grew. Gaps of time were missing, memories lost, second guessing everything, madness, as Alexandra would say. Complete crank-filled madness. The shock was wearing off. He swerved the Berg and took another swig of the canteen he'd filled with turmeric water. He choked down the pain-killing and bacteria-stopping concoction. It tasted like armpits, as bitter and pungent as the rust-covered spice looked. A warmth within his mouth and throat made him cough, but Nicholas had taught him long ago that the spice aided in calming inflammation. Always keep a jar of turmeric on hand, dear Mikhail, Nicholas would say. Mikhail could not remember if the spice was meant to be used on open wounds or just internally, so he did both. Maybe it was neither. Who the hell knew? Not Mikhail. He guided the Berg back to the edge of the mountains outside of New Petersburg. As long as he kept the wound from getting infected, he'd live despite the loss of blood. If he could remember his landing path. Where was his landing path? He needed to get to his very own safe haven. The cabin in the woods that no one, not even and especially Alexandra, knew about. The one he'd built high enough above sea level to watch the war unfold. Interesting. He built a cabin. This guy's a Minecrafter. He took a deep breath, tried to think hard, but he had so many questions still. What did Nicholas mean when he said that trauma could affect his brain? His personality, squeak, squeak, quack, quack. The squeals of the pig echoed in Mikhail's mind, but there was no pig on board. Madness. Mikhail was going crazy. Nicholas warned him this could happen. Inflicted trauma. That was it. The war would continue. The remnant nation had the coordinates and the time. As long as the crank army held itself together, literally and figuratively, the evolution could still be stopped. He laughed to himself as he swerved the Berg back and forth. The pig in Mikhail's mind, his own wild boar of a soul, screamed to be freed. The future of the world depended on cranks. Cranks, laughable, complete madness. He should have shot every single one of them. Deady dead, dead, back in the bunker. But he couldn't. He didn't shoot them deady dead, dead because he'd have been killing himself. All he'd worked for, gone. The gone. Where was he going again? The cabin. He had to land and get to the cabin. He steered the Berg like a proper captain and took another sip of turmeric water. This guy is going crazy. And then we have the other one, Alexandra. The goddess stirred her tea, staring deeply into the tea leaves as if they held some sort of answer. But there was nothing there that could calm her mind. Manas had survived the boat ride. Of course he did. Those women at the villa may have known more about creating the cure than her, but Alexa knew more about living it. She knew the evolution was good. It was already inside of her. She recited the digits in her mind. She'd been able to keep the women at the villa from destroying everything, but only temporarily. Goddess, Flint opened the door without a knock. Maybe he'd knocked and she just hadn't heard it over her mind's buzzing. Regardless, the man made it far too easy for her to take out any small frustration on him. What is it, Flint? She enunciated every word so he knew to be quick about it. What is it, Flint? She enunciated every word so he knew to be quick about it. The man stood in the doorway, tapping the handle of the door. The speech is set for Sunday, after Mass. Alexandra watched him as he nervously tapped the door. What is it? What else? Nothing, Goddess Romanov, he paused. Nothing that requires your attention right now. He backed from the doorway. Alexandra pushed her tea away. But you'll bother me with whatever's making you nervous later. What is it? Flint nodded and stepped 1 foot back in. The pilgrims are. They're just starting rumors about Nicholas's death. He sighed. You know how people get when they don't see activity. Alexandra had given the people activity in the biggest way possible. She'd had Nicholas killed so that the evolution could culminate. But they'd never thank her for that because they'd never know. Even if they knew, they would not understand. What actions do you suggest? She walked toward Flint in the doorway. His hand shook. I think sharing the details of the investigation into Nicholas's death would quiet their fears. He wants her to announce that she did it, but this is going to cause even more fractures in their already fractured community. She tried hard to control her face and not roll her eyes. Before Nicholas's death, the pilgrims had been afraid of the northern lights. Excuse me. There was no fear out of reach of their feeble minds. You understand, I've been grieving. The people will. She was stopped by shouts outside, but more than that was Flint's expression. His reaction to the voice, complete terror. His eyes grew wide and he held his breath. She knew the servant well enough to know that he didn't want her hearing whatever that woman was shouting. He walked to the window and flung it open. Nothing, goddess. The pilgrims will. Shh! Alexandra waved him off. Below her on the street, a pilgrim in a mustard yellow cloak flailed her arms in madness. Alexandra squinted. The pilgrim looked familiar. She was one of the women without horns who'd met with them when Alexandra revealed her plans to Manus. One of the devout followers that she'd taken down to the maze, with whom she'd shared sacred ground, with whom she'd shared the title of murderer. The woman ran through the streets screaming words that Alexandra did not quite understand, because it was something that never should have been spoken aloud, like the sacredness of the maze. This was to stay a secret, but the woman below her window shouted of Nicholas's death and shouted of the murder. Alexandra went through the digits as her ears buzzed. Her vision went red. One of the Godhead murdered their own, the pilgrim yelled, her voice screeching and raw. Alexandra turned to Flint as calmly as she could after closing her window. It's a shame when they reach for rumors like this. She shook her head as if the pilgrim were nothing more than a sad case of madness. Take that woman off the streets for her own good. She walked back over to her tea, surely cold by now. I'd hate to see anything happen to her. Probably more of we need something to happen to her now than I'd for anything to happen to her, right? Part 3, Sadina. Despite leaving her mom, her best friend, and her favorite late night fire companion behind, Sadina didn't feel alone. Trish made up for their absence. She tried to get Sadina to hydrate and eat more, like a mother. She let Sadina poke fun at her, like a best friend, and she tried to listen and offer wisdom, like only Old Man Frypan could. Still, it wasn't the same. It would never be the same again, and despite all of Trish's best efforts, Sadina needed time with her thoughts to process everything that had just happened. She needed time alone. She walked up the ship's deck and sat against the trunk that held the anchor. Minho nodded to her from the captain's wheel, and she waved back. Sadina wanted to feel okay and to be okay for Trish, but it wouldn't happen overnight. She pulled out the Book of Newt and ran her hand over the wear marks from the journal living in Frypan's pocket for who knew how many years. She didn't know why, but she sniffed it, half expecting the stench of sweat and armpits. But it smelled like leather and his famous stew. That made Sadina miss him even more. She flipped through the book and let her finger land on a single passage. I feel the presence of a certain knowledge. I have had friends, and they have had me. And that is the thing. That is the only thing. She shut the book to keep from crying. She would read the entire book of Newt because she'd promised Old Man Frypan, but she wouldn't read it today. The loss of Lacey and Carson still stung, and never knowing if she'd see Isaac again, or her mom, or Frypan. All of these things sent Newt's words even deeper into her heart. Hey, you okay? Trish walked across the deck with a frantic look on her face. Hey, yeah. Sadina took a deep breath. She knew she needed to talk to Trish about how she felt. She needed to. but she was so emotionally exhausted that it seemed an impossible task. At the same time, she knew nothing would change unless she communicated her feelings. Can I talk to you for a minute? Trish's eyes moved back and forth, quicker than Dominic playing ping pong with himself across the makeshift net he'd made below deck. Nervous. I don't like the sound of that. Trish, just sit. She motioned next to her, and Trish plopped down. Listen. Nothing good happens when you say listen to someone. Listen, Sedina repeated firmly. He needed Trish to get past her own insecurities to really hear what Sedina was about to tell her. Trish nervously cracked her knuckles, and Sedina reached for her hands. When you're nervous, you need this. Sedina bounced Trish's hand in her own. You need touch and reassurance and words of affirmation. She paused to think of how best to explain the next part. When I'm nervous or scared, or I don't know how to feel, she let go of Trish's hand to point to herself. I don't need that. In fact, when you do what makes you feel better to me, it can feel uncomfortable sometimes. And she took a deep breath when Trish's eyes started to tear up. Look, I know you went through hell when Isaac and I got kidnapped. I know it was harder than hard, and it was for me too. I thought about you every single second, and when I came back, you were just so relieved, but you haven't let me out of your sight for more than 5 minutes, and I know, I'm sorry, I fell asleep, and then Dominic shouted something, and I got startled, and you weren't there, and not just today, or right now, I need you to know that when I'm going through something, the kind of support I need is space. Even though I love you more than anything in this universe, but we're all on top of each other down there, and I don't always need to be. So you're saying you want space? Her voice lowered. I'm saying that what comforts you can be overwhelming to me. Touch comforts you, while it can feel suffocating at times to me. Selena was trying so hard to be slow and gentle with her words. But no matter how it was said, the word suffocating had just come out of her mouth, formed itself into a weapon, and stabbed Trish in the gut. You're suffocated? Trish stood up and walked to the railing of the ship. Shit, Sedina thought. Trish, let me finish, she caught up to her. No, I don't want to suffocate you. I'll just stand over here and cry by myself since my girlfriend needs space. I'm not breaking up with you. Sedina, that's exactly what I need space means. Trish gave her a cutting look. I know, but it's not what I mean. She took another deep breath. I want you to know how I feel in case anything happens. Anything could happen to us in Alaska. And if they need me to go into some weird place without you, I need to know that you're okay and not going to lose your ship because I'm not there. And if something bad happens, like losing my mom, Ladina swallowed hard and tried to tame the tears that appeared like dew at the thought of her mom. What will comfort me more than anything else in bad times is just helping me create space. I need more alone time than you. I need time to reflect and gather. And sometimes being touched makes me feel even more scattered and overwhelmed and anxious. Not that I don't like your touch because I most certainly love it. When things are going on all at once, I need to process. It's too much for me. It's overstimulating. Does that make sense? Overstimulating, Trish repeated. I guess. Yeah, like when you reach for my hand or touch my arm when I have too much going on in my head, it doesn't feel like a normal touch. She tried her best to explain by taking Trish's hand in hers and tapping all of her fingers across Trish's skin. Feels all zippy zappy. She stopped the tapping and squeezed with love. Even though you don't mean it to, and even though I don't want it to. Hell, Sedina was still trying to understand all these feelings herself. She'd never been more stressed than the night of the amphitheater back home, and every day since had just kept compounding onto the day before it. Trish chewed her lip, but Sedina added excitedly, not all the time, not even close, just lately when there's been so much craziness. When we're relaxed, swimming by the cliffs or taking a walk, it's not like that. Stress and anxiety just make it all wonky bonky, totally wonky bonky. Sedina smiled, and that made Trish smile. Slowly nodded. I get it. I really do. And please don't ever say zippy zappy again. Only I'm allowed to make up stupid words. Now that's a deal. Sedina reached deep into her pocket to what she had made back on the coast. Thanks for listening and understanding. I know I'm weird. You are. Trish kissed her on the forehead. But you're my favorite kind of weird. Sedina smiled. Here, she handed her the gift. I made this for you before we left on the boat. Again. She watched anxiously as Trish slowly opened the small palm leaf wrapped gift that Isaac helped Sedina forge. Trish lifted the necklace in front of her, wire wrapped in metal, soldered, a chunk of wood dangling from the chain. It's a piece of driftwood I found when Isaac and I were kidnapped that I kept. I don't know why. I guess it was something I could carry to comfort me when we didn't have anything. It was something that I could say, this is mine. It's beautiful. Trish examined every intricate part of the necklace with her fingers. Thank you. Just like this piece of driftwood was something that I could hold on to and say was mine when I had nothing. I want you to know that our love is yours. You have it. And just like the driftwood floating itself back to the shore from wreckage, I promise to always find my way back to you, no matter what. Selena reached over to help Trish fasten the necklace. The same storms that might pull us apart will also pull us closer together, okay? She looked at the necklace on Trish, then hugged her hard. Man, that's cheesy as hell, and I loved every word. And this. Trish fingered the chunk of wood dangling from her neck. So sometimes you need space, and I'll give you space. Sometimes you need not to be touched, so your nervous system doesn't go wonky bonky. And sometimes you make me freak out that we're breaking up, but then give me the most romantic thing ever. Thanks for talking. She hugged Sedina again and whispered, I love you. I love you too. They kissed, and Sedina squeezed Trish even tighter, and the cheese fest might have lasted forever if Dominic didn't race up the deck shouting like the cabin was on fire. You'll never believe what I found. He ran over to them, slapping his arms with a book in his hand. What's that? Trish asked, finally breaking up the hug. The captain's log. He was shouting every word and went looking for Minho. I found Clatter's captain's log. Part 4. Minho. Chaos. Commotion. The yelling from Dominic and everyone suddenly flanking the captain's area caused the orphan to tense up. He turned from the captain's wheel and visually identified each crew member. Zadina, Trish, Dominic, Miyoko. Everyone but Roxy and Orange, who were untangling a mess of ropes. No one had fallen off the boat, at least. Freaking Mino. If Dominic had truly found a captain's log, it might help him figure out the problem with the ship's steering. Here, let me see. He reached for the small book in Dominic's hands. Good luck reading it. What, she had terrible handwriting? Trish asked. No, it's written in some kind of secret code, he replied. Miyoko punched him in the bicep for some odd reason. You let Happy look at it before me? Poor guy doesn't know his nickname, huh? The orphan asked, but no one answered. Happy? Where'd you find this? Miyoko actually answered. Behind the wood panel of the steps, Dominic slipped and crash landed. That made sense. Mino does not have a high opinion of Dominic, honestly. Mino had heard a thud a few minutes earlier and figured they were just horsing around. Miyoko continued. When we looked to make sure the steps were okay. I'm fine, by the way. Thanks for asking, Dominic added. Miyoko ignored him. There was this little book squeezed in between the paneling. Flipped through the pages and saw the English alphabet, but all mixed up. Nothing he could read. He recognized a word here and there, but wasn't sure. Polución científico, observación, extraordinario, reacción, exploración. It's all in Spanish, chat. And then one word in particular that would be clear to anyone on the planet. Infección. It's not a code. I think it's Spanish. Spanish, Dominic repeated, as if he'd never heard the word. Yes, Spanish. Another language? Let me see if Roxy can read this. Somebody watch the wheel for a minute. Dina stepped in and took over. Minho started to walk away, but then turned back to Dominic. Don't spin it. How'd you know I wanted to spin it? Minho glanced at Sedina. Don't let him spin it. Classic, so good. Freaking Dominic. Part 5. On the south side of the boat's deck, Minho found Roxy and Orange sitting amongst the jungle of knots. Different colors and thicknesses of ropes draped over them. A mess of white nylon, yellow cord, orange twine, and blue anchor rope all tangled together. Fishing lines wrapped around thicker sailing ropes, and Orange used her knife where needed. They were so mesmerized by the task at hand that they didn't even look up when Minho approached. That Kletter lady who sailed before us, she left a notebook behind, he said. What did the note say? Orange asked, still not looking up from her knots. Not a note, a notebook, a captain's log, but it's in Spanish. He bent down to their level. Can you read Spanish, Roxy? A little, yeah. Judging from the upkeep of the boat and its poor condition, the orphan wasn't sure how helpful any advice from the last captain might be. Still, he was curious. Can you take a break and see if any words stick out to you? He handed Roxy the book. She looked back at him as if he was a knotted mess himself before she flipped through the pages of Cletter's notes. I don't know. I mostly learned Spanish from posted warning signs. Here, Minho found a page with some of the words he recognized. Words about experiments and expeditions. Even I recognized some of it, he pointed. The word infection is repeated on almost every page. Infección. That finally perked Orange up. She documented the flare? I don't know. Something. Let me see. Orange dumped the pile of rope from her lap and leaned over. Roxy pulled it closer to her face and then further away. I know this word. First canned beets will stain you. I know this word. She tapped. She tapped the handwritten text. Kadukado. It wasn't anything the orphan had heard before. What's it mean? He handed the book back to Minho. Done every canned good I've ever seen. Tells you when food will go bad, or tells you when food will go bad. Expire. Expire. That didn't sound good. Could it also mean something else? Orange shrugged. Foxy sighed. Well, let's see. She looked to the sky. A time limit, a length of time until something will go bad. Oh, and she stopped talking. What? Minho asked. Foxy didn't say anything, just made that same disapproving expression she pulled whenever Minho talked about the remnant nation. Her eyes got a little bigger and her mouth a little tighter. What else does it mean? Well, sometimes, in our language at least, people might use the word expire when they talk about a person dying. Dying. Now that made sense, not just from the orphan's past and all the death he'd seen and delivered, but from Isaac's stories of Clether arriving on the island. Those people on Clether's crew who Isaac said were shot in the head when the boat first arrived. Maybe she wrote about them. He carefully examined the text around the word caducado until his eyes locked onto infeccion again. What if they were infected? Why would she have brought infected people to the island? Orange asked. Minho agreed it didn't make much sense. They must have caught the disease en route. No captain would kill their entire crew for the fun of it. Maybe that's why she murdered them. They got infected on the journey, and she had to shoot them. Thought about how many times words like reaction and infection showed up in Clether's notes. Or maybe that was it. Had to be it. He looked behind to make sure Dominic, Sedina, Miyoko, and Trish were still at the captain's wheel. Maybe the islanders have something to do with it. Sedina's blood, Cohen's rash. Maybe they're not immune after all. So they were coming to infect them. Interesting. Which we kind of like has already been hinted at before. Cohen already told Isaac, but these guys here on the boat don't know any of that. All right. All right, chat. We're approaching chapter part 4, not chapter 4. We're on chapter 19. Chapter 19, haunted houses, Isaac. So they've reached the house. They're back. But yeah, about 20 more pages, and we can call this one a stream, and then we'll do part 4 next time around, and we'll finish this up. All right, let's get going. Chapter 19, haunted houses. 1, Isaac. There it was, the house where everything changed and their adventure became an escape mission, then a survival mission, then a rescue mission. There was something about the house, even before it all went bad, that creeped Isaac out. The windows were broken and dusty, the paint peeling, the burnt siding from some long ago. The paint peeling, the burnt siding from some long ago fire. Once he walked past this awful place where he and Sedina had been taken, where Clether had been viciously murdered, he hoped they could all. She's still no. They took her body, but she's not dead in that building still. That's right. Okay. Where Clether had been viciously murdered, he hoped they could all reset their future and forget Letty and Timon had ever mentioned evolution and extinction. Isaac wondered about Letty and Timon, if maybe they hadn't been half crank when he met them. Then he wondered if Clether's body was still decaying somewhere. He picked up his pace and decided it was best not to find out. He twisted the grass-braided bracelet around his wrist. Every day that passed, the bracelet got drier and drier. He hoped Sedina and the rest of the crew were doing okay. You think they're getting close to Alaska? He asked the group. Closer every day, Old Man Frypan replied. What do you think, Miss Cohen? Think Minho threw Dominic overboard yet? He liked the challenge of trying to make Cohen laugh. No, I'm sure Dominic is on his best behavior, but Sedina, Cohen coughed. Now she can be stubborn. I hope she and Minho don't have any differences. Isaac hadn't even worried about that. Cohen was right. They were two strong personalities, but he'd count on Trish and Miyoko to keep them in line. He knew the islanders would stick together. It may be hot out here, but at least we're not seasick. Isaac waited for Jackie to chime in, but she didn't. She'd been awfully quiet the last mile or so. He turned to her. Right, Jackie? Her walk slowed. I think. Jackie? He stopped, tried to catch her eyes, but her distant gaze was unfocused. She looked right through him. She's infected. What's wrong, Jackie? Isaac knew she was prone to nausea, but the path had been smooth and straight. Do you need to throw up? You gotta blow chunks, blow them over there. Old Man Frypan pointed to a bush of cloverweed, but Jackie wouldn't make it that far. Her knees buckled, then her legs folded beneath her like an island hammock cut by a storm. Isaac rushed to her side and caught her weight in his arms, lowering her to the road. Newt, Newt fell from her shoulder and scampered off into the weeds. No, he's gone forever. Bye, Newt. They're not gonna find him. That poor little lizard's gone. Amphibian, not a lizard, amphibian. She reached for Cohen. Miss Cohen. Cohen took Jackie's hand. What's going on? Cohen asked. Jackie felt heavy, almost lifeless in Isaac's arms. Can't feel my lip or my tongue or my leg. Jackie's voice was slow and slurred. Isaac looked at her and then back toward the house, as if it held some kind of curse. It was probably haunted by Cletter's spirit. Poor Jackie. What's happening? Isaac looked to Old Man Frypan, their most trusted source of wisdom, but his face didn't hint at any answers. Isaac frantically searched her skin for a rash. Nothing, no sting marks, no rash. We've got some bad luck going on here, Frypan said. Isaac, in a panic, looked up at Cohen. I don't get it. No rash? You're still standing, but she's not. How he could feel the warmth radiating from Jackie's skin. Whatever this was, they had to get to the villa even more quickly. Isaac, it's okay. We're going to help you. The villa can't be that far. I'm going to carry you, okay? With one big lift, Isaac hoisted Jackie into his arms. You're okay. He tried to reassure her with a forced smile, but she wasn't looking back at him. She was looking right through him. I think, she slurred, I can't see. Isaac walked as fast as he could through the endless neighborhood, Jackie in his arms, his biceps burned, tendrils of flame leaking through his muscles. But he wouldn't stop to rest until they found someone, anyone who could help. He'd run if he knew where they were headed, but the uncertainty only aided to the panic in his chest. The houses are getting bigger up here. We have to be close, Frypan offered. They reached a mansion rimmed with circular columns in the front. Something moved. There! Cohen pointed at a person near the front door, but Isaac knew could just be a wandering crank. The knife Minho had given him was strapped to his boot, but his best crank killer lay limp in his arms. Please help, Cohen shouted. The figure ahead stopped and turned. As they walked closer, Isaac, sweating profusely, breathing with labored heaves of hot air, could see a woman with blonde hair. Despite his weak condition, he started to run, Jackie bouncing in his arms. Stop! Don't come any closer! The stranger's voice trembled and cracked, as if she weren't used to talking so loudly or talking to other people. Please, we just need help. Isaac slowed down, but he didn't stop. We're scientists, not doctors. We're not resetting bones, and we sure as hell aren't a crank palace. If she's got the flare, you take her there. Hear me? The woman turned her back on them and opened the door to what Isaac hoped was the villa. Is this the villa? He asked in desperation. Kletter told us about you. The woman stilled, then slowly turned back around. Kletter? Is she with you? She's not that far behind us. Just a bit dead, but you don't need to know that, he thought. Isaac made eye contact with Cohen and Old Man Frypan, hoping they understood. The woman looked each of them up and down and eyed Frypan as if she had never seen anyone so old. And maybe living out here among the half-cranks, she hadn't. What did Kletter mean to these people to change the stranger's mind so quickly? What's wrong with the girl? She asked. Isaac answered wearily, almost to the absolute end of his strength. We don't know. She just started to slur her words, then lost feeling in her legs, and then sight. I think it was in that order. I don't know. It all happened so fast. The woman released a heavy sigh. Okay, well, we'll bring her in, but you all need to stay out here until I get clearance. We can't compromise our lab. We don't have the flare, Frypan said. It's not the flare I'm worried about. It's evolution. Come on, lay her down right here in the doorway. In the next 30 minutes, we'll know if she'll make it. Evolution. Such an interesting thing. Evolution? Isaac wondered. What was that supposed to mean? So if she's been given the cure, so there's multiple villas all over the freaking world, it seems, right? And they're all working on their own things. And the most secret one was the one up in Alaska that Alexandra went and just raided. So interesting. I don't know what to think at this point. There's all kinds of gaps in our knowledge because we skipped 2 books of the Maze Runner series that lead up to this one. So interesting, but I think a lot of this is like self-contained. I think a lot of this like definitely referencing the original series, but I think a lot of this like this new concepts and ideas. I don't think evolution was something that they ever discussed in the main one, but I could be wrong. I could correct me if I'm wrong, please. Correct. I like to be corrected if I'm wrong. Thank you, appreciate. Wait, Cohen spoke up. I need help too. She pulled down her scarf and revealed the rash. The woman started shaking her head back and forth so vigorously Isaac thought it might pop off. He shouted at them, Let me see all of your necks, now! She pointed vigorously at Isaac, then Frypan. Only the ladies who are sick, Frypan said as he lifted his chin and turned in a circle, as did Isaac, Jackie still in his arms. The woman walked completely around Frypan to look at his neck again. You're tattooed. She said it in a tone that was somewhere between worship and fear, probably in disbelief that he could actually be a glader of old. It was Frypan's turn to sigh. Yes, I'm a subject from the original Maze trials. Isaac had never heard him say it out loud like that, but perhaps the scientists would appreciate it being put so formally. More like a hero, Isaac wanted to add, a survivor, a legend. The woman again appeared conflicted, honored one moment, horrified the next. Isaac couldn't hold Jackie another second. Can you help us or not? He asked. The woman slowly nodded, obviously still stunned. Come in, all of you. We'll take the cellar entrance. She led them down the gravel path that wrapped behind the building, finally to a door in the rear that was painted black, like the pupil of an eye. Part 3, Zimena. Zimena! There we go. I got it right the first time, though. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't think. Are you AI caption bot? Are you an AI? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. It's got to be, right? Because it's responding to my words, my pronunciations. Got to be some sort of AI. Getting close, she asked Carlos. Abandoned houses lined both sides of the crumbled streets. Yeah, maybe 20 minutes. You keep saying that, and then we walk another hour. Sweat drenched her shirt. If I keep saying that, then one of these times I'll be right. He smiled, always so genuine from him. Give me a break. It's been 2 years since I walked this path. The heaviness hung inside Zimena's chest. Once she. Sorry, I had to check. Not happiness. But okay, Zimana is better than that man. A heaviness, not a happiness. A heaviness hung inside Zimena's chest, one she knew well and had learned not to cling to. The men's chest. Oh my god. I can't look, or it's just gonna bother me. All right. Moving on. A heaviness hung inside Zimena's chest, one she knew well and had learned not to cling to. Anxiety in and of itself was sometimes a premonition. She tried to focus on each of the passing houses and imagine what bright colors graced their walls when they were first built. Looky, Zimena. Carlos picked something from the ground. A small bush of weeds. Mariana loves these. Well, no, she actually hates them, but she'll laugh if I bring her some. He gave Zimena a single weed to investigate. She grew these right after you were born. Me? Why? She looked at the little pink flower on the end of the red clover, but she didn't understand Carlos's excitement, and her face must have shown it. Because your mom said she'd been drinking red clover tea before she got pregnant with you. So Mariana ripped out and collected every last clover in the village, no matter what color it was. Carlos chuckled. Eventually, she planted a whole garden's worth of just clovers. He continued gathering a bouquet of weeds for his wife. Ximena nodded. The whole village did a lot of weird things after she was born. What's clover tea taste like anyway? Terrible. Exactly like a weed should taste. But if she wasn't tending the garden or drying the clover, she was busy drinking the tea day and night. Hot tea, iced tea, making tea cakes from it. A child. She wants a child so badly. Doing something you hate for someone you love is, well, that's unconditional love. She would have been a great mom, Ximena agreed. Before realizing she said it in the past tense, she hoped Carlos didn't notice. There's still time, he laughed. I know to a teenager like you, I must seem ancient, but we're not that old yet. Ximena looked at the house behind the patch of red clover and wondered if the woman who'd lived there before the flare ever needed to drink fertility tea. Her eyes focused on an unusual deterioration pattern on the house. Burnt siding. Do you see that? She asked Carlos, but he was too busy trying to make weeds look like flowers. How pretty. The side of the house got burned. You think that's from a fire or an explosion? She walked closer to the melted siding of the dusty haunt. Carlos stopped picking. I know you think people used to walk around throwing hand grenades every day. Probably not. I think they're a revolutionary weapon of defense, and more people had them than you think. She was so focused on possible evidence of her favorite weapon from history that she didn't pay attention to the ground below the burnt siding. Oh my god, she thought everyone was just walking around with grenades all day. Once she did look down, she couldn't look away. Carlos, she had a hard time catching her next breath. The anxiety from before found its reason to spread. Her heart pounded all the way to her eardrums. Carlos, quick! She didn't actually want him to look. He had a weak stomach, but she needed him to verify that she wasn't just imagining the clothed skeleton at her feet. Oh, geez, get away from it. He waved her closer to him, but she couldn't take her eyes off the bones. The knife sticking out of the pants pocket looked oddly familiar. Wait, Carlos. She bent closer to the dead body and reached into its pocket to free the knife. Mana, you'll get a disease. Come on. Carlos said it as if he'd forgotten for a moment that she couldn't catch the flare. No one in their village could, and no disease was as great as the flare. This is from our village. She held up the knife so that Carlos could see the embroidered outline of an eagle, with a circle around it, on the weapon's sheath. The same design that Ximena's mother sewed into everything, to symbolize truth. She traced the white and brown thread of the eagle's head sewn directly into the leather. Her mom's design. Carlos stepped forward, and Ximena gave him the knife to see for himself. He looked at it with dismay, as if the blade had just popped his entire balloon of hope. Oh shit. Suddenly looked like he was going to throw up. What? He took a deep breath and looked away from the body. Does the left hand have a snake ring on the second finger? He asked, as if he already knew the answer was yes. It took Ximena a few moments to distinguish what was and wasn't a part of the skeleton. But a shiny sterling silver ring reflected the sunlight. A snake eating its own tail? What's that mean? Carlos avoided Ximena's eyes. A symbol for the eternal cycle of destruction and recreation, or some such mumbo jumbo. No, what's that mean as far as the person the ring belongs to? Its former person. Who is it? Who was it? Not anyone from Ximena's village. She knew that much. I already saw the next I already saw the next words, chat. I already saw the next freaking words. It's Kletter. Carlos looked at her as if she was supposed to know who that was. Everyone who visited their village had 3 or 4 names: birth names, middle names, surnames, town names. Did they work for the villa with mom? It's Annie Kletter. Ximena's shoulders tensed. All the air in her lungs whooshed out of her. This is Annie? She looked down in disbelief, anger. Absent-minded Annie, dead, like a black jackrabbit in the desert, right here on the way to the villa. Ximena would have rejoiced at the thought days ago, but now it only made the anxiety in her chest grow to a monstrous size. Mom and Mariana, they wouldn't have just left her here. They would have given her a village burial. Why didn't they? She paced, gripping the knife in her hand. They're the ones that died on the boat. They're the ones who were dead on the freaking maze cutter. Carlos didn't answer. He just held his bouquet of weeds. Ximena let the anger surge through her body to block the tears from coming. Not that she would have cried for Annie's death. No, she was glad that woman was dead. Ellas están muertas. But the tears she wouldn't let come were for her mom and Mariana. Something was wrong. They wouldn't have left someone they worked with for so many years behind. Her mom wouldn't have let the animals feed on Annie's dead flesh without any sign of ritual or prayer. They wouldn't have just left her here. Maybe There's no reason. This close to the villa? She shook her head. Maybe that's why your mom and Mariana stayed behind for so many extra months. The lab needed extra hands. Carlos turned back to the road. Come on, they're at the villa. We'll find answers. Maybe Kletter left for a different trip and they have no idea she's gone. Ximena followed Carlos up the road. Her feet pounded the cracked pavement. She wanted answers, justice. She hoped Carlos was right. She hoped for hope. The anxiety in her chest said that hope was a devil, luring her to a false reality until both the lie and the truth killed her. A circular object in the road caught her attention. She bent down to pick up a grass-braided bracelet. What's that? Carlos asked. Is it fresh? Yeah, she said as she wrapped the bracelet around the handle of Annie's knife. Might be a clue. Someone had to kill Annie Kletter, and I part 4. Isaac. The woman at the villa had never told them her name. Isaac wished he'd asked as he sat impatiently in the quarantine room with old man Frypan. They were there to be observed, but it had started to feel more like a prison than a safe place to wait. Frypan sat quietly against the back of the glass pod. Isaac wanted to believe that Jackie would be okay. I hope she's okay. Damn, that came out of nowhere. That totally came out of nowhere. What the hell? Just went blind out of nowhere. Poor girl. Isaac wanted to believe that Jackie would be okay. He wanted to believe that he'd see Sedina again and reunite with Sedina with her mom, and that Frypan would live to be 100 years old. Please let that happen, yes. But the truth was rarely better than what you wished for. Isaac thought he couldn't have had more emotion. Isaac thought he couldn't have been more emotionally drained until he looked down and realized his grass bracelet had broken off somewhere. Must have been when he was carrying Jackie. He rubbed his bare wrist. That was it. They passed Kletter on their way up here. Damn. They would have just looked down. Hey, he knocked on the glass wall of his room and got another scientist's attention. He had counted 5 total people since they'd stepped into the building. All of them wore black clothes under white lab coats. Something almost like a cult. Did all scientists do that? He tapped the glass again, and a man at the back wall of the lab looked up at him. Can you tell me what's going on? Isaac shouted, despite the guy looking right at him. He said nothing and returned to his work. They're not going to level with you because they don't think you're on the same level as them, Frypan sighed. But you brought us all in because we're unique. We're immune. Sadina and the old man interrupted him. Ever wonder if the truth ain't really the truth? Isaac paused. What do you mean? You don't think we're immune? Things change. Isn't that what evolution means? He closed his eyes and settled further against the glass wall. When a stew gets too salty, you don't throw it away. You gotta add a potato. Isaac Isaac shook his head. Seriously, what does that mean? The mention of food made his stomach growl. You can add a peeled potato and it'll soak up the salt in the stew, but you got to remember to take the potato out. And if you get clever and chop the potato up and leave it in, you can solve that problem. That and if you get clever and chop a potato up and leave it in, you can solve the problem that way too. But then you'll end up with a potato soup rather than a stew. Isaac, so you just keep on adding potatoes. Okay, gotcha. Isaac truly loved this man and his lessons. Are you talking about the evolution with a capital E? I'm just saying that we're in a salty situation here. He looked around the lab as if he were afraid the scientists wouldn't like what he was saying. We came in to help Cohen and Jackie, but we got to make sure these 2 potatoes, he pointed to himself and then to Isaac, get the hell out of this pod as soon as we can. His eyes motioned to a glass pod way in the corner of the lab, which had a black curtain hanging on the outside. Black curtains like black uniforms. Everything in this place had a sense of mystery. What's in there? He asked. Frypan pointed to the bottom corner of the glass pod. The curtain was flipped up just a bit, slightly revealing the contents of the room. But Isaac couldn't really see anything. Just wait, old man Frypan whispered and watched. Isaac waited. He didn't know what he was looking for, but nothing happened until a flash of metal moved within the visible space. Something like Isaac Something like Isaac had never seen before, brighter than any metal he'd ever hammered on the forge. Sharp, jagged. What is that thing? That is something I never wanted to see again. Fear in Frypan's face highlighted every wrinkle and every age spot. That, my friend, the Griever. Isaac turned back to the pod, but the Griever's leg or arm, whatever it was, had moved on. He could only reach into his imagination for the stories Frypan and the elders told of the glade and the Grievers coming after them. Singing the gladers with a variation of the flare. Nightmares come to life. Could that really be a live Griever in there? It seemed almost impossible, like a fairy tale. He turned to Frypan. What's the longest you think 2 potatoes can simmer in a stew before they get mashed? He didn't hesitate. Maybe a day at most. Oh my god. The stakes have gotten even higher, chat. A Griever. There's a freaking Griever in the stinking pod in the back of the room. Part 5, Minhom. Whether they're true immunes or not, this Kletter lady sounds a lot like the grief bearers. I don't trust any of it. Orange was sitting on the captain's bench and flipping through the captain's log. Mino had spent 2 nights looking at the book in detail, but couldn't string enough words together to form an opinion, other than the same conclusion that Orange had just come to. He never trusted the grief bearers? Even before that crazy stunt on the berg? Minho focused on the waters ahead. It wasn't long ago that the grief bearers of Remnant Nation had sent him away so that he could become one of them, one of their peers. But he'd never known before he'd never known before they shoved him off a cliff that he didn't want that. Not only did they torture children for the sake of rising up one day to kill the Godhead, but Minho didn't want to kill the Godhead. He wanted to join them and wanted the world to evolve. But of course, he couldn't tell Orange that. Evolution, even the mention of the word, was blasphemy within the orphan army. Something about them never felt right. Orange handed over the captain's log and picked up her binoculars. And that's even funnier because they are part of the evolution. Freaking Mikhail is over there controlling them. They can keep the evolution from spreading. So interesting. So freaking interesting. Something about them never felt right. Orange handed over the captain's log and picked up her binoculars. Minho relaxed behind the captain's wheel. Unlike everyone else on the boat, Orange could watch for whales and other ships ahead without trying to fill the space between them with words. It was just like they were back on the wall guarding the remnant nation, except no one would die. Hopefully. Meanwhile, Minho could decompress in silence. He didn't have to work so hard to understand the dynamics of the group or to fight his soldier instincts. When it was just him and Orange, he could be himself, the orphan named Minho. Good old Minho. He watched the horizon as he steered northeast. The sounds of the ocean grew on him, like the wet scraping the bottom of the ship made, like the wet scraping the bottom of the ship made as it cut through the water. The whoosh of the wind over the deck, even the way Dominic's cheerful voice carried up the deck like an echo from the cabin below. Minho would miss all of this when they got to Alaska, making some good memories. Orange lowered her binoculars and turned to him with a confession. Skinny and I never said anything out loud because we didn't want to get reinforced, but once you left, we knew you wouldn't come back. Really? The notion brought him peace, like an affirmation that he'd made the right decision. He wondered if the grief bearers had known too, if that's why they'd fastened his cordage so tight, why they'd pushed him so hard off the cliff, why they came after him. Orange nodded. Yeah, we were jealous. He never dreamed that anyone would even notice his absence, let alone be jealous of it. Have you thought about how you're going to do it? She asked. Kill the Godhead? No, it wasn't a lie. He looked at her for a reaction, but she didn't have one. Maybe it was the number of days they'd spent on the open ocean, but Minho decided to test Orange. What do you think evolution is really about? Her eyes got big with surprise. Sorry, it's just something I think about sometimes. He returned his attention to the ocean ahead of them. I don't know. Orange wasn't accustomed to having permission to think on her own about the subject. But if she had time to think about crank armies, surely she would have thought about the evolution and what it was or wasn't, right? I guess it could be what we were told, or it could be something completely different. I only know one thing for sure. I'm never stepping foot back in that place. Me neither. The walls of the remnant nation were ones he'd never see again, ever. But as soon as he said it, he felt a pang in his gut. Hit. What's wrong? Orange asked. Your face just did a thing. Nothing. Just remembered something I left back there. Minho, no weapon, artifact, or internal organ is worth going back for. How about a person? A little boy named Kit. I couldn't believe he was telling this story to Orange, but if anyone could understand how he felt, it would be her. One night, I was walking through the tunnels of hell, and I heard something that sounded like a dying dog. Saved him, I think. Minho wasn't sure how long the boy would have lived after such a beating. Maybe he should have just put the kid out of his misery. What the remnant nation called reinforcement was just another version of death, beating their will and subordination far below the surface. Saving Kit was the first time Minho went against the things he'd been taught. Leaving the remnant nation and never going back was the second. Orange seemed genuinely impressed. Wow, can't believe they didn't kill you on the spot for that one. I don't think it was a grief bearer that hurt him. Whoever it was ran away. Orange set her binoculars on the bench. You should feel proud of that memory, not sad. The orphan shook his head. Pride had nothing to do with it. When I asked the boy his name, he said Kit. When he asked me back, I told him I didn't have one. Shame. In that same moment of his life where he'd shown the most courage, he'd also displayed the most cowardice. He took a deep breath. You couldn't have, and he shouldn't have told you his name. That's probably why he was beaten for giving himself a name. You know that. She crossed her arms at this and shook her head. Minho knew she'd understand. He needed to stop berating himself for it, but not telling Kit his name lingered as his one regret. I just try to forget about it. When I was a kid, I got reinforcement real bad like that. You did? He looked up at her and down for visible scars, but she was pretty spared. He shook his head. Not beat like this kid was. No? Orange turned away from Minho and lifted up the bottom of her shirt. Across her lower back were 3-inch thick scar lines that looked like she'd been nearly cut in half. I was 10. They heard me sing. Poor girl, man. Dee 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 dum 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 dee 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 da dum da da dum meow 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 meow. She should not be punished for singing. Poor little 10-year-old girl. She lowered her shirt and faced him again. Damn, Orange, you're tougher than I thought. That image would be impossible to get out of his mind. Slashes. All for his singing? But if Orange could survive that, then there was hope for Kit too. Minho tried to move on. Even so, as the captain of the ship, I give you permission to slap Dominic across the head anytime he starts singing again. Orange smiled, leaned into the captain's wheel, and whispered, "He's awful, right? Like a seagull squawking over a dead fish." Poor Dominic, doing his best. Minho shook his head, his face pained. I can't believe we've listened to him hum and holler this whole trip. You've been holding back on us. You should sing over him, with him, but preferably instead of him. Maybe, she shrugged, not quite able to move on. I hope, yeah, hopefully you do. Hopefully you will work up the courage. You've been traumatized for sure, Orange. Orange is our favorite color too. Orange and purple. Those are the two colors, chat. Orange and purple. But damn, good. It's a sign. It's a sign. We hope things work out for you, Orange. Thanks for being Minho's friend. The orphan understood. He once had a beating so hard he didn't talk for a month. Minho felt intrusive even thinking about it, but he had to ask her. He slowed down the ship. Orange deserved his full attention for this next question. What's your name? His eyes focused on hers. Orange tilted her head in confusion. Your name? She trembled slightly, as if a priestess could slap her right now for even thinking about it. But the Remnant Nation had no hold over them. Now, even out here in the middle of the ocean, they were free. She had to have a name. You know my name. It's Orange. Orange is a nickname, not a real name. He wanted to know what this girl, standing in front of him with scars from singing, called herself in her own mind. Yeah, but nicknames are better than real names because only friends call you by your nickname. She nudged him. Which means I have friends. Good point. Good point. Mino took it in like the slow moving waves ahead of them. He wondered if having a nickname was the one true measure of friendship, and if he'd ever have a true friend. Orange interrupted his thoughts. Just like Skinny, and I always called you Happy. Mino searched his memory for a time when Skinny would have called him that. He could only vaguely place it. Happy? It wasn't anything he would have called himself. Yeah, Orange squinted at Minho. Everyone calls you Happy. Kept her hands around her mouth and shouted across the boat to the others climbing on the deck from below. Hey Dom, what's Minho's nickname? Dominic was all too enthused to answer. Happy! He waved from across the deck. She told us on the berg. It took actually meeting you for me to really get it. Then, completely unprompted, unwarranted, and unwelcomed, Dominic started singing a song about being happy while the others clapped along. If you're happy and you know, clap your hands, meow, meow. If you're happy and you clap the meow, 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 Minho couldn't help but smile. He moved the lever to pick up speed. Roxy and Miyoko clapped enthusiastically, letting out hoots and hollers to go with the song. Minho the orphan, with no name, now had two names, one he chose, and one he just might grow into. Happy. Nice. Part 6, Sedina. Anchoring close to the shore before sunset helped the maze cutter stay safe while Minho and Orange rested. But Sedina hated how much the ship rocked back and forth from the incoming waves. She leaned against a bunk and closed her eyes while the others prepped dinner. Can't you do that on deck? Miyoko asked Dominic. Getting fish slop everywhere and it smells terrible. Worse than you. Jackie would be vomiting if she were here, that's for sure, Trish added. Sedina tried to block out the noise and commotion, but thinking about Jackie made her think about Isaac, which made her think about her mom and Old Man Frypan. Her heart ached. Dominic was never phased. I cook them down here so it makes more sense to prep them down here. I like the smell. Plus, the deck is extra windy today. Oh, that's right. Dom gets cold, Miyoko teased. Sedina opened her eyes. Hey, Dominic stood tall with a fish in his hand. I didn't know when we packed for this adventure that we'd be freezing our asses and our heads off. With the fish on his own head, mouth down like a hat. Oh my god, disgusting. That's not sanitary, Dominic. What the fuck? Who taught you? And also, Alaska's cold. I guess he would never have known that. True. Gross. Stop, Miyoko waved. What? I'm the godhead of fish. You're the godhead of nothing. She swatted the fish from his head. Trish laughed and looked to Sedina, but Sedina, worried about her mom, didn't feel like laughing. Today, for some reason, she felt like something bad was about to happen. Oh my god, no! Premonitions! She kept telling herself that they likely made it to the villa safe and sound, but not knowing what was really going on not but not knowing what was really going on only made the feeling worse. It gave that bad feeling room to spread out and take over. You look like you're going to throw up, Trish said as she came over to Sedina. I'm not seasick, but I don't feel good. She wasn't nauseous, but she wasn't right. It came from a different place in her guts. I think I'll go up for some air. I shall honor your space. Trish smiled and blew her a kiss. She was taking their talk particularly well, which Sedina was thankful for. It seemed like the further the maze cutter got from her mom, the sicker she felt and the more space she needed. Selena climbed the steps to the deck, her eyes squinted at the change in brightness. The sun setting off the water was blinding, a brilliant contrast to the dim cabin below. And Dominic was right. It was cold. She walked over to Orange and Roxy along the railing. Hey, Orange said. Her fair skin looked redder by the day. What's wrong? You going to be sick? No, just, I don't know. I have a bad feeling that something might happen to my mom. Sedina unloaded this before even thinking that something had most definitely happened to Orange and Minho's moms and dads. Sorry, that was insensitive. It's okay. We grew up knowing our moms were probably dead in flare pits somewhere. That's why the sunburn doesn't bother me. Could be worse. Could always be worse, chat. Good point. At times, the things Orange and Minho said felt dark, and this was one of those times. But it's true, it could be worse. I just can't shake the feeling that something's really wrong. Sedina said again as Minho walked over, carrying ropes in his arms. Why didn't you stay behind then? Stay with your mom. Minho had actually expected her to stay behind. Minho always caught Sedina off guard. He was so direct with his questions in a tone that sounded like he judged her. Truth was, his comment hit her so hard because she hadn't even considered staying behind. The pressure of their mission, the call to Alaska, was so great, it didn't feel like not going was an option. But he was right. It had been. Isaac didn't think twice about staying with her mom so that she could go to Alaska. She could have stayed behind too. I don't know. I mean, the cure and all, I think if we get to the Godhead and we can help them with that, then. But if you're the cure, shouldn't you have stayed with her? Pushed further, and the tears just about welled up in Sedina's eyes. But she doesn't have the flair, right? Sedina looked at Minho, Roxy, and Orange. Did they know something she didn't? Roxy took a deep breath and shrugged. What did that mean? Roxy? She searched the woman's body language. Okay, sweetie, you weren't wrong to leave her. You did what you felt you needed to do, just something that Kletter lady wrote in the log made Minho wonder about things. She put her arm lovingly around Sedina's shoulders. Wonder what? She examined each of their faces for a clue. Orange didn't say anything. Minho just looked at Roxy. Sedina shrugged off Roxy's arm. What is it? What did Kletter write? Roxy sighed and threw her arms up. Well, I don't know. I can only read a few words here and there, but she chronicled a lot about the infection and expiration, and she looked at Minho and he nodded. And she wrote a couple of pages about your mom. She what? The waves against the boat rocked Sedina extra hard. What did it say? Minho handed her the captain's log. We can't understand it, but back here, Roxy pointed, these pages where she wrote Senora Cohen a couple of times next to Infeccion. Sedina looked down at the journal and Kletter's stupid, sloppy handwriting. She stared at the words surrounding Senora Cohen and wished that they could have unjumbled themselves to make sense, but they didn't. That feeling deep in her gut, the one that had something is wrong, wasn't a premonition. It was a regret. She should have stayed with her mom. Sedina handed the book back to Minho, and tears fell from her eyes. Roxy wrapped her in a hug. Sedina wished Trish had followed her up to deck and not given her space. Couldn't have felt more wrong. She was one big mess. Shouldn't have come. You got too much on your shoulders, girl. Roxy rocked Sedina back and forth in a hug. It's okay. You're doing what you believe is right, and Minho didn't mean to make you cry. Did he? She glared at her adopted son, stern eyes held with a necessary pause for an apology. Good old Minho. I'm sorry, Minho said. I just wondered why you didn't stay. What a way with words. Sedina stared into the sunset and let the tears fall. It'll be okay, Orange said. But as sunburned as Orange's skin looked, that's how Sedina's heart felt. Just try to do a sniper move, Minho said. I don't think shooting anyone is the answer here, Roxy continued to rock Sedina. Orange nodded her head as if she knew. No, that is a good idea. She held her hands out. Try to stay calm under pressure. No, that's a good idea. She held her hands out. To stay calm under pressure, we did breathing exercises. Roxy loosened her arms around Sedina. Before you shoot at a trespasser or an animal, you always take in a lungful of air through your nose and let it out real slow through your mouth. Then the rifle, and you are steady enough for a shot. But I'm not going to shoot anyone, Sedina shook her head. No thanks. It's not about pulling the trigger, Minho said. It's about letting everything go in that breath, out of your mouth so your body can steady. You put every anxiety, every worry, every thought you ever had in your whole life into that exhale, and you push it out of you to somewhere else. He pointed far off into the horizon. Go on, try it, Roxy said. Can't hurt. And they all waited for Sedina to breathe. It Felt silly. Sometimes silly is the right thing, chat. Sometimes just be silly. Just be a silly, stupid idiot. She wiped her eyes and took a slow inhale through her nose and held her breath, long enough to think about everything she needed to put into her long enough to think about everything she needed to put into her exhale to let go. Worries about her mom being alive, seeing her again, ever seeing Isaac again, living up to Old Man Frypan's legacy, living up to her great uncle Newt's legacy, being a part of the cure, beating the Godhead, all of it at once. And then Sedina let it out in a slow whoosh. She released all the worries and pressure into the air to float away somewhere else. She pictured those thoughts skimming along the top of the ocean and pictured the same tide that rocked the ship so roughly, taking them away. Far, far away. Bye. Good riddance to your bad thoughts. Part 7. Ximena. Ximena. Oh, I did it. I did it. I did it. Here we are. Carlos. Oh, so they're about to meet up with Isaac's group. Isaac, Jackie, Frypan, and Cohen. Here we are. Carlos pointed ahead to a building with columns in front, but it didn't look like what Ximena remembered. The villa seemed so much bigger and scarier when she'd been little. The mansion in front of her looked worn down and weak. Concrete crumbled on the steps leading to the front door. She headed that way. Carlos grabbed her arm and stopped her. Not that door. Why? Ximena waited for Carlos to point to another entrance, but instead, he looked into the trees to the left and to the right. He wouldn't let go of her arm. What? She asked again. Carlos pulled her by the wrist to the side of the villa. Her foot slipped on the knotted roots of a dried up bush. Que diablos? She looked at Carlos for an explanation. They have security, he said in a whisper. In the trees? He watched as he scanned the whole property with his eyes, keeping his body tight against the villa. He couldn't tell her about this on their long journey. It would only have confirmed her doubts about the trustworthiness of Annie and the villa. And Carlos probably hadn't wanted to hear miles and miles of Ximena's questions. What's going on? You're acting like they'll shoot us for trespassing. Carlos didn't say anything, which told Ximena everything. He waved her to follow behind him along a thin path in between more dried bushes. Ximena took the knife she'd taken from Annie and lifted it out of its sleeve. But you worked here too. Isn't there some sort of password you can give them? It's more of a process than a password. He carefully stepped closer to the back of the building. I don't know if they still have traps, so we have to... Traps? Traps are for animals, not people. Carlos turned to her. The work they do here is very important, Ximena. It needs to be protected. Sighed. She'd heard that her whole life about how important the work at the villa was, but she had yet to see the impact of that importance. She only saw the ways it affected her own village negatively. She matched Carlos's steps as best she could until they turned the corner of the house and reached a door painted all black. The paint was chunky, as if someone had painted over it in layers, sloppy. This was a sign of the work the villa did on the inside. Then her thoughts about the villa would stay unchanged. Carlos knocked once, hard. The crack of sound echoed around them, as if the door was made of metal. Why did the villa have metal doors? Carlos walked back and forth. He only did that when nervous. Think they already know about Annie? He whispered as if someone might hear him through the steel door. No, if they did, she wouldn't still be there. They wouldn't have left her there, not like that. Ximena steadied herself as the door opened. To her surprise, someone from their village was on the other side. Ximena recognized her features, but couldn't remember her name. Sienna, she guessed. Anita, the woman said without any warmth. She eyed the two of them up and down. Hola, ¿podemos entrar? Carlos asked, but Anita shook her head. Tenemos que hablar con la profesora Morgan ahora. Ximena insisted that they speak to Professor Morgan, but Danita started to close the heavy black door. Ximena stopped her with the same hand that held Annie's knife. Annie Kletter, ellas están muertas. Danita paused. Ella está muerta? Ximena nodded. ¿Podemos entrar? Carlos asked again, motioning to the door. Part 8. It had been years since Ximena had seen the inside of the villa. Danita led them through the lower rooms to the main floor without a word. Ximena would have expected questions about the village and her family back home, but Danita seemed only focused on the task at hand, finding Morgan. Carlos held his bouquet of red clover as if he might see his wife at any moment, but Ximena wasn't even looking at the faces of the workers and scientists around her. She was too busy examining the machines and instruments that changed room by room. The villa had grown in its capabilities greatly since she had been here last. They reached the main floor and Danita turned to them. Wait here. Carlos nodded. Ximena's memories of the villa came to life when she looked over at the glass-cased room built within the lab floor, a room she knew well. It was the only one they'd built for her after her mother insisted Ximena be on the same floor of the lab as she worked, not below with the rest of the subjects. She started to walk over to the glass box, but Carlos grabbed her wrist again. He motioned with his eyes to the two men inside. Ximena hadn't noticed them before. Two men, one old and one young, sat with their knees folded into their chests. They looked tired, haggard, or maybe it was defeat. She remembered how well the glass box they called a safety pod made her feel the exact opposite. Isaac and Fry Pan. The young man stood and made eye contact with Ximena. She quickly looked away. Carlos, Ximena, what is the news? Carlos, Ximena, what is this news about Clether? Professor Morgan walked in from the hallway, and just hearing her voice made Ximena shiver. Morgan's hair was just as blonde as Ximena remembered, and her hands just as bony. We found her body about 2 miles from here, south, in the Narrows. Carlos put his backpack down, but still clutched the red clover. Can you let Mariana know I'm here? Mariana was with Clether, Morgan said it with Mariana was with Clether. Morgan said it without emotion. But Carlos acted like he hadn't heard, still holding the bouquet of weeds as if his wife would be there soon. She took a research group with her to find the descendants of the immune. You should know this. Descendants of the immune? No, her mother would have told her if that's where she was going. Where's my mom? She realized Annie's knife was still in her hand, and she gripped it tighter. Morgan carefully approached Ximena and helped her put the blade back into its sheath. She hated that her mind and body still followed directions from Morgan so easily. It had been years, but just like that, Morgan had disarmed her. Your mom was with Mariana and Clether. But we found Annie. Mom and Mariana weren't there. Ximena realized that they hadn't checked inside the haunted house. They should have. Why didn't she? She looked at Carlos. Why didn't we go in? Why we didn't go inside that house? They wouldn't stay there. But that wasn't what Ximena meant. What she was trying to say was they should have looked inside the house for more dead bodies. Well, they'll turn up, Morgan said, as if Ximena's mom and Mariana were just a pair of lost dogs who wandered from the pack. We have 4 of the group they found here from the island. She motioned with her eyes to the 2 men inside the glass room. Those are the immunes? She looked back at the room. Both of the strangers were dirty, sickly. Something wasn't right. My mom and Mariana went looking for them with Annie. Then how are they here and Annie's dead? My mom wouldn't have left the mission. Professor Morgan didn't respond. Ximena turned to ask the 2 men herself, but Carlos stopped her again. Ximena. His sharp tone reminded her of Abuela letting her know when she was out of bounds. But why weren't they as worried as she was? Morgan finally spoke quietly. They told us that Clether was coming right behind them. He stepped closer to Ximena and Carlos. Was she dead long? Ximena nodded. She had never seen a body so decomposed. Being out in the open certainly hadn't helped. How long do you estimate? Morgan turned to Carlos as if he knew, but he hadn't seen any more dead bodies in his life than Ximena, and he'd barely glanced at Annie's. He wasn't an elder who conducted burials. He had no measure of decomposition. He was just a man looking for his wife, holding a bouquet of weeds, and too much hope. Poor guy, too much hope, way too much hope. Ximena took it on herself to guess. The flesh was liquefied. Bones. She was no longer a child to be set aside in a glass box. Morgan nodded slowly, only once, an up and down motion that somehow made Ximena feel heard, respected. They know more than they've told us. We need to question them. We need to question them carefully. She motioned to the lab techs in the background. Danita walked back over. I'll help, Ximena said before thinking. Morgan looked impressed, perhaps seeing potential. But it wasn't about that. Ximena needed to know what these men who traveled with Annie knew. She needed to find her mom. Join us then, Professor Morgan said. Danita, open the door. And here we are. Part 4. Chat, we did it. The limits of paradox. Are the thoughts that run through my head again and again and again the most important or the most meaningless? The less I think about something, the more thoughts and images seem to come along. Even in the darkness of my mind, I see them, I hear them, I feel them. Where are they coming from? The Book of Newt. Chapter 20, Flare Above, and we will rejoin with Alexandra next time. Thank you for joining me, chat. I appreciate you. Fear on me, thank you for stopping by and chatting in the freaking our and our chat. Live stream chat. I appreciate you. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see you. I'm so sorry. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate you. All right, everybody out there, take care. Have a great one. Tomorrow, I don't know if I'm gonna be streaming, but if we do, it won't be a reading stream. It'll be a gaming stream. So I'll decide that later. In the meantime, everybody, take care of yourselves. Be well. Think about what we just read today. That was a good portion. That was a good part of the book. A lot of things happened, a lot of escalation, and we're reaching the climax. Here we are, part 4. Are we going to see a war? Is that something that's going to happen? Are they going to, is the Remnant Nation going to take on the Godhead at their complex in Alaska in this next part? Who knows? That might even be like the next book. I don't even know. We shall find out next time, and we'll be done with the Godhead complex. We'll move on to other books after that, but we will be returning to the Maze Runner main series. I'll finish the last 2 books in the original trilogy. All for the future. All right, everybody. Take care. Be well. Have a great one. And we will see you next time. Da-dum, da-da-dum, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Meow, 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 meow. Bye. See you later. Don't forget, drink plenty of water. Stay hydrated out there. Eat some good food. Take care of yourselves. Go for a run, go for a walk, watch a good movie, sing a song, and we'll see you next time. Meow, 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 meow.